Chicago rain hammered down like bullets the night Megan Turner's world ended in a hospital parking lot. One second she was an ER nurse searching for her car keys after a brutal double shift. The next, a needle pierced her neck and everything went black. 3 months later, she woke chained in a freezing basement, starving, her ankle shredded by rusted steel. Then armed men stormed in, led by Franco Ravellini, Chicago's most feared mafia boss. And when Megan whispered the name of her kidnapper, Franco's blood turned to ice. The monster who destroyed her life was his own younger brother. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stick with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey reaches across the world. The rain came down in sheets that October night, turning Chicago's streets into rivers of black asphalt and neon reflections. Megan Turner barely noticed. She was too exhausted to care about getting soaked, too numb from 16 straight hours in the emergency room to feel anything except the bone-deep ache in her feet and the hollow grinding in her stomach that reminded her she'd forgotten to eat lunch. Again, her scrubs were stained with someone else's blood, a stabbing victim who'd coded twice on her table before they finally got him stable enough for surgery. She couldn't remember his name, couldn't remember most of their names anymore. That should have bothered her more than it did. The parking lot stretched out before her like a vast concrete wasteland, poorly lit and mostly empty at 2 a.m. Chicago General's night shift workers knew better than to park close to the building. The good spots went to doctors and administrators who worked bankers' hours and drove cars worth more than Megan made in a year. She fumbled in her coat pocket for her keys, fingers clumsy with cold and exhaustion. The fluorescent streetlight above her flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging her into shadow. Shit. Her voice sounded small in the rain. She kept walking, squinting through the downpour at the rows of parked cars, trying to remember where she'd left her beat-up Honda that morning. Everything looked different in the dark, unfamiliar. That's when she felt it, not heard it, not saw it, felt it. The presence of someone behind her. Megan's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She turned, one hand still buried in her pocket, the other clutching her bag against her side. Nothing. Just rain and shadows and the distant sound of traffic on the expressway. "Get it together," she muttered, turning back around. "You're losing it." She found her keys, found her car, reached for the door handle. The needle hit her neck like a wasp sting. Her knees buckled before she could scream. Strong hands caught her weight, dragging her backward as the keys clattered to the wet pavement. She tried to fight, tried to kick, tried to do anything the hospital's mandatory self-defense training had taught her, but her muscles wouldn't respond. The world tilted sideways, colors bleeding into darkness, sound fading to a high-pitched whine that filled her skull. The last thing she saw was the rain-soaked pavement rushing up to meet her face. Then nothing. When Megan woke, she didn't know where she was. Darkness pressed in from every direction, thick and suffocating. Her head pounded. Her mouth tasted like copper and chemicals. She tried to move and pain exploded through her right ankle, white-hot and blinding. She screamed. The sound echoed back at her from stone walls she couldn't see, confirming what her other senses were already telling her. She was underground, trapped, chained. Panic clawed its way up her throat. She yanked against whatever was holding her ankle, and fresh agony lanced through her leg. Something wet and sticky soaked through her scrubs. Blood. Her blood. "Help!" Her voice cracked, desperate and raw. "Somebody help me!" No response, just the steady drip of water somewhere in the darkness and her own ragged breathing. Megan forced herself to stop pulling against the restraint, forced herself to think like the ER nurse she was, not the terrified woman she'd become. Assess the situation, triage the injuries, focus on what you can control. She was lying on cold concrete. Her right ankle was secured by something metal, felt like a shackle, old and rough-edged. The chain rattled when she moved, maybe 6 feet of play judging by the sound. Her hands were free, which meant whoever had taken her wasn't worried about her escaping. That thought should have been comforting. It wasn't. She ran her fingers carefully along her ankle, biting back whimpers when she touched the torn skin. The shackle had cut deep, probably down to bone. Without proper treatment, infection was inevitable. Sepsis, gangrene, death. "No," she whispered into the darkness. "No, no, no." Time stopped meaning anything after that. Sometimes a dim light would flicker on somewhere above her, never bright enough to see clearly, just enough to confirm she was in a basement with stone walls and a low ceiling. Sometimes she heard footsteps overhead, muffled voices she couldn't make out. Sometimes a figure in a black mask would descend the stairs and leave a bottle of water and a handful of crackers before disappearing again without speaking. She tried begging, tried screaming, tried reasoning. The figure never responded, never removed the mask, never stayed longer than 30 seconds. Megan lost track of days, lost track of everything except the constant pain in her ankle and the growing certainty that nobody was coming to save her. Nobody even knew she was missing. She lived alone, worked rotating shifts that made her schedule unpredictable. Her parents were dead. Her few friends were scattered across the country, connected only by occasional texts and holiday cards. She could disappear and the world would barely notice. That realization hurt worse than the shackle. Awesome. Franco Ravellini stood in the rain outside his younger brother's mansion and tried to remember when everything had gone so wrong. Not tonight. Not this month. Not even this year. Years ago. Maybe decades. Maybe it had always been wrong and he'd just been too busy building an empire to notice the rot at its foundation. Boss? Marco appeared at his elbow, rain streaming off the brim of his hat. We're ready. Franco nodded once, sharp and final. He'd given Roberto every chance to explain, every opportunity to prove the ugly rumors circulating through Chicago's underworld weren't true, every benefit of every doubt. His brother had wasted them all. The mansion loomed before them, all pristine white columns and manicured lawns that screamed old money and new arrogance. Roberto had bought it 6 months ago with cash Franco had given him to invest in legitimate businesses. Instead, Roberto had thrown parties that lasted 3 days, bought sports cars he crashed within weeks, and surrounded himself with sycophants who praised his name while laughing behind his back. Franco had tolerated it, barely, because Roberto was family, and in their world, family meant everything, until it didn't. No survivors except Roberto, Franco said quietly. I want him alive. Marco's expression didn't change. Understood. The front door exploded inward under the battering ram. Franco's men poured through the opening like a flood, weapons raised, voices shouting commands in Italian and English. Gunfire erupted immediately. Roberto's people had been expecting trouble, which told Franco everything he needed to know about his brother's guilty conscience. He walked through this chaos with the calm of a man who'd survived worse. Bullets punched through walls around him. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Franco ignored it all, his focus locked on one destination, the basement. Because the informant who'd reached out to him 3 days ago, a terrified kid who worked as Roberto's driver, had mentioned something that made Franco's blood run cold. Your brother keeps something locked in the basement, something alive. At first, Franco hadn't believed it, couldn't believe it. Roberto was reckless and stupid and arrogant, yes, but this level of depravity required a darkness Franco hadn't thought his brother possessed. He'd been wrong. The basement door was reinforced steel, locked from the outside with 3 separate deadbolts. Franco put 2 bullets through the lock mechanism and kicked it open. The smell hit him first. Unwashed bodies. Blood. Human waste. Then he saw her. The woman was curled against the far wall, one ankle secured by a rusted shackle that had torn her skin to ribbons. She was emaciated, filthy, barely conscious. Her scrubs, hospital scrubs, he realized with sick certainty, were stained with old blood and God knew what else. Cristo, Marco breathed behind him. Franco descended the stairs slowly, hands visible, voice low and steady despite the fury burning through his veins. It's okay. We're not going to hurt you. The woman's head jerked up. Her eyes were huge in her gaunt face, feverish and unfocused. She tried to scramble backward and cried out when the chain yanked her wounded ankle. Don't move, Franco said, dropping to one knee several feet away from her. You're hurt. Let me help. No. Her voice was a rusted whisper. No, please. My name is Franco Ravellini. I'm here to get you out. The name made her freeze. Her eyes sharpened, focusing on his face with an intensity that surprised him. Ravellini, she repeated slowly. Roberto Ravellini. Franco's jaw tightened. You know my brother. He did this? She gestured weakly at the shackle, the basement, herself. Months ago. Hospital parking lot. I was, I worked, her breath hitched. I didn't even know him. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Franco looked at her scrubs again, at the faded name tag still pinned crookedly to her shirt. Megan Turner, RN. A nurse. Roberto had kidnapped a nurse. How long? Franco asked quietly. I don't know. Megan's voice broke. Forever. 3 months. Time doesn't... She pressed her palms against her eyes, shoulders shaking. Just kill me, please. I can't do this anymore. No. The word came out harder than Franco intended. He softened his tone. Nobody's killing anybody. Marco, get bolt cutters, now. Marco was already moving. Franco stayed where he was, watching Megan struggle to pull herself together. She was stronger than she looked. Had to be, to survive this long in conditions that would have broken most people. But strength had limits, and she was well past hers. Where is he? She asked suddenly. Roberto. My men are finding him right now. Good. The word was barely audible. I want him dead. Franco understood the sentiment, shared it, actually, but he couldn't give her that satisfaction. Not yet. He'll pay, Franco promised. I swear it. Megan laughed, a broken sound that turned into a sob. Everyone says that. Nobody means it. I do. Something in his voice made her look at him again, really look at him. Franco held her gaze, letting her see the truth written there. He meant every word. Marco returned with bolt cutters and a first aid kit. It took 3 tries to break through the shackle's rust-weakened metal. When it finally snapped open, Megan gasped. Relief, or pain, or both. Franco caught her before she collapsed, supporting her weight as Marco wrapped her mangled ankle in clean bandages. Hospital, Marco said quietly. She needs... No hospitals. Megan gripped Franco's arm with surprising strength. No police. They'll ask questions. I can't. My estate has medical staff, Franco interrupted. Private. Discreet. They'll take care of you. Why? Her eyes searched his face, desperate and confused. Why are you helping me? Franco didn't have a good answer. Didn't have any answer except the truth. Because you survived my brother, he said simply. And I owe you for that. Roberto Ravellini was dragged into Franco's study 20 minutes later, bleeding from a scalp wound and spitting curses in 3 languages. 2 of Franco's men held him upright, while a third zip-tied his wrists behind his back. Franco sat behind his desk and said nothing. Just watched his younger brother bleed onto the imported rug their father had brought back from Sicily 40 years ago. This is bullshit, Roberto snarled. You can't just storm into my house. Your house. Franco's voice was very quiet, very calm. The house I bought you, the security I paid for, the life you're wasting. He leaned forward. Tell me about the woman in your basement. Roberto went pale. What woman? Don't. Franco stood slowly, deliberately. Don't insult me by lying. Franco, listen. Her name is Megan Turner. She's a nurse. You kidnapped her 3 months ago from Chicago General's parking lot and kept her chained in your basement like an animal. Franco's hands curled into fists on the desk. Explain. Roberto's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. She rejected me. Can you believe that? I asked her out after she stitched up my hand in the ER, and she laughed in my face, said I wasn't her type. Me, a Ravellini. So you took her. I taught her a lesson. The room went very still. Even Roberto's guards took a step back. Franco moved around the desk with the careful precision of a man controlling something violent. He stopped inches from his brother's face. You taught her a lesson, Franco repeated softly, by torturing an innocent woman for 3 months because she hurt your feelings. She humiliated me. Franco's fist caught Roberto square in the jaw, snapping his head sideways. Blood sprayed across the oriental rug. Roberto collapsed to his knees, coughing and gasping. Get him out of my sight, Franco said flatly. Lock him in the East Wing. Nobody talks to him. Nobody feeds him. Nobody goes near him until I decide what to do with him. The guards dragged Roberto away, still sputtering protests and threats. The door closed. Silence rushed in to fill the space. Franco stood there for a long moment, staring at the blood on his knuckles. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Family is everything. Blood protects blood. Never turn on your own. Bullshit, all of it. His father had built an empire on violence and fear and called it tradition, had raised his sons to believe power justified anything, had created men like Roberto who thought the world owed them whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted it. Franco was done honoring that legacy. He cleaned the blood off his hands and went to check on Megan Turner. They'd set her up in one of the guest suites on the mansion's second floor, far from Roberto's locked room, far from the violence still being cleaned up downstairs. Franco's personal physician, Dr. Alvarez, was just finishing when Franco knocked. "Come in," Alvarez called. Megan was sitting up in bed, her right leg elevated and wrapped in proper medical dressings. An IV ran into her left arm, pumping fluids and antibiotics into her dehydrated system. She looked marginally better than she had in the basement, but only marginally. Her face was still too thin, her eyes still too haunted. "How is she?" Franco asked. Alvarez stripped off his gloves with practiced efficiency. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, infection in the ankle wound that's going to require aggressive treatment, possible nerve damage, definite psychological trauma. He glanced at Megan. "She's lucky to be alive." "I don't feel lucky," Megan said quietly. Alvarez packed his medical bag and excused himself, leaving Franco alone with her. An awkward silence stretched between them. "Your brother?" Megan asked finally. "Locked up, under guard." "That's it?" Her voice sharpened. "He kidnapped me, tortured me for 3 months, and you're just locking him in a room?" "For now." Franco pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. "I need to figure out what to do with him." "Turn him over to the police." "Can't." "Why not?" Franco met her eyes. "Because my family doesn't work with law enforcement. Ever. It's not personal. It's survival. The moment police get involved, everything unravels. My business, my people, everything I've built. So he gets away with it." Megan's laugh was bitter. "Of course he does. Rich people always get away with it." "He won't get away with anything," Franco said quietly. "I promise you that." "Your promises don't mean shit to me." "Fair enough." Franco leaned back in his chair, studying her. Megan Turner wasn't what he'd expected. Most people pulled from situations like hers emerged broken, shattered into pieces that never quite fit back together. But this woman was angry, sharp, fighting back even when logic said she should curl up and surrender. He respected that. "Stay here while you heal," he offered. "My estate is secure, medical staff on site. Nobody gets in or out without my approval. You'll be safe. Safe." Megan repeated the word like it was foreign. "I was safe in a hospital parking lot. I was safe doing my job. Look where that got me." "This is different." "How?" "Because I won't let anything happen to you." Megan stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed. A real laugh this time, sharp and disbelieving. "You're a mobster. Your brother is a psychopath, and you want me to trust you." "No," Franco admitted. "I want you to let me prove I'm different than him." Something flickered across her face. "Not trust. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of consideration." "Fine," she said finally. "But the second I'm strong enough to walk, I'm gone." Franco nodded. "Fair enough." He stood to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. "Why?" Megan asked. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Franco turned back, one hand on the doorframe. The honest answer was complicated. Messy. Tangled up in guilt and disgust and the sudden realization that his brother had become the kind of monster Franco spent his career eliminating from Chicago's streets. But he gave her the simple version instead. Because someone should. The first week passed in a blur of medical treatments and forced rest. Megan slept 16 hours a day, her body desperately trying to recover from months of starvation and trauma. When she was awake, Dr. Alvarez monitored her vitals, adjusted her medications, and answered her questions with professional detachment. The second week, she started eating real food again. Not much, her stomach couldn't handle it, but enough to stop the constant gnawing hunger. The third week, she began walking. Just short trips from the bed to the bathroom at first, leaning heavily on a walker Dr. Alvarez provided. Her ankle screamed in protest every time she put weight on it, but Megan gritted her teeth and pushed through. Pain she could handle, Helplessness, she couldn't. Franco checked on her every evening, never stayed long, never pushed for conversation, just appeared in her doorway, asked how she was doing, and left when she gave him a one-word answer. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt oddly reassuring. On her 18th day in the mansion, Megan finally ventured out of her room. The estate was massive, 3 floors of marble hallways, priceless artwork, and furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Staff moved through the corridors with quiet efficiency, barely acknowledging her presence as she limped past. She found Franco in a study lined with books, sitting behind a desk covered in paperwork. He looked up when she knocked, surprise flickering across his normally controlled features. "Megan." "I'm bored," she announced, leaning against the doorframe, "and going insane staring at the same 4 walls. You got anything useful I can do?" Franco's eyebrows rose. "You should be resting." "I've been resting for 3 weeks. I'm a nurse, not a patient. Give me something to do or I'm going to start rearranging your medical supplies out of spite." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "There's a room on the 1st floor we've been using for storage. It used to be an office. You could turn it into a clinic if you want." "A clinic?" "My men get injured. Usually we handle it ourselves, but having someone with actual medical training would be useful." Megan considered this. Working again. Using her skills, feeling like something other than a victim. "Okay," she said. "Show me." The room was a disaster. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, furniture covered in dust sheets, windows that probably hadn't been opened in years. But it had good lighting, decent space, and a door that locked. Megan stood in the middle of the chaos and felt something she hadn't felt in months: purpose. "I'll need supplies," she told Franco. "Medical equipment, medications, sterile instruments, a proper exam table. Make a list. I'll have everything here within 24 hours. Just like that?" "Just like that." Megan shook her head, half laughing. "You know this is insane, right? Setting up a clinic in a mob boss's mansion?" "Probably," Franco agreed. "But you're the one who asked for it." "Fair point." She started that afternoon, sorting through boxes and making lists of what she needed. Franco's housekeeper, a stern woman named Lucia, who seemed to run the entire estate through sheer force of will, appeared with cleaning supplies and 2 younger staff members to help. By evening, the room was empty except for furniture and possibility. Franco brought dinner to her at 9 p.m., balancing 2 plates and a bottle of wine like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting everything on what would eventually be her desk. Megan eyed the expensive-looking pasta and wine with suspicion. "Is this how you always bribe people?" "Only the ones who threaten to reorganize my medical supplies." She laughed despite herself. Sat down, took a bite. They ate in companionable silence for a while before Megan asked the question that had been bothering her for days. "What's going to happen to Roberto?" Franco's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. "He's still locked in the East Wing." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." "For what?" Franco didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with something Megan couldn't quite identify. Regret, maybe? Or exhaustion. "I need to figure out how to punish him without destroying everything I've built," he admitted. "Roberto is family. That means something in our world. If I kill him, I make enemies. If I turn him over to police, I expose the organization. If I let him go, I prove I'm weak." "So you do nothing." "So I do nothing," Franco agreed quietly. "And it eats at me every single day." Megan studied him across the desk. Really looked at him for the first time since he'd pulled her out of that basement. Franco Ravellini was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe 40, though the weight he carried aged him. His hands were scarred from violence she didn't want to imagine. His eyes held the kind of exhaustion that came from years of impossible choices. He was a criminal, a killer, probably. Definitely responsible for things that would make her sick if she knew the details. But he'd also saved her life. "For what it's worth," Megan said quietly, "I don't think you're weak." Franco met her eyes. "What do you think I am?" "Tired." She took a sip of wine. "And trying." Something shifted in his expression, softened just slightly. "Thank you," he said. They finished dinner in silence. And when Franco left, Megan sat in her half-finished clinic and wondered when she'd stopped seeing him as the enemy. Weeks turned into a month. The clinic took shape under Megan's hands. Franco delivered everything she requested: equipment, supplies, medications that probably came from sources she didn't want to know about. She didn't ask, didn't push, just organized her space and prepared for her first patient. He arrived 2 days later. A guard named Tony, who'd taken a knife to the shoulder during what Franco vaguely described as business complications. The wound was deep but clean, already showing signs of infection from amateur stitching. Megan cleaned it properly, administered antibiotics, and stitched it closed with the precision that had once made her Chicago General's fastest suture specialist. "You're good at this," Tony said, wincing as she worked. "I'd better be. I spent 8 years learning how." "Why'd you stop?" The question caught her off guard. Megan's hands paused over the wound. "I didn't stop," she said finally. "It stopped for me." Tony didn't ask for clarification. That was the thing about Franco's people. They knew when to push and when to leave things alone. More patients followed. Guards with gunshot wounds, staff with infections. Even Lucia appeared one morning with a badly sprained wrist she'd been ignoring for weeks. Megan treated them all with the same focused competence she'd once brought to the ER. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, she began feeling like herself again. Franco noticed. "You're smiling more," he observed one evening, appearing in her clinic doorway with his usual impeccable timing. Megan looked up from the inventory she was organizing. "Am I?" "You are. It's good to see." Something warm flickered in her chest. She pushed it down. "Don't get used to it," she said lightly. "I'm still planning to leave once I'm strong enough." "I know." But neither of them mentioned it again. Cool. The nightmares came every night without fail. Megan would wake gasping, heart pounding, phantom chains wrapped around her ankle. The darkness of her bedroom became the darkness of Roberto's basement. The silence became dripping water and distant footsteps. She tried everything, left lights on, took sleeping pills Dr. Alvarez prescribed, exhausted herself during the day until she could barely stand. Nothing helped. On the worst nights, she'd find Franco sitting in the hallway outside her door when she stumbled out for water at 3 a.m. He never said anything, never asked if she was okay, just sat there back against the wall, reading something on his phone or staring at nothing. The first time it happened, Megan demanded to know what he was doing. "Making sure you're safe," Franco answered simply. "From what? Your own house?" "From the things in your head." After that, she stopped asking, just accepted his presence the same way she'd accepted everything else about this strange new life, with wary gratitude and the constant awareness that nothing about this situation was normal. One night, instead of going back to her room, Megan sat down in the hallway beside him. "Can't sleep?" Franco asked. "Can you?" "Not really. Not for years." They sat in silence for a while, shoulders nearly touching, both staring at the opposite wall like it held answers neither of them could find. "Tell me something true," Megan said suddenly. Franco glanced at her. "About what?" "About you. About why you do this." She gestured vaguely at the mansion, the life, everything. "Why the violence? Why the empire? Why any of it?" "Because it's what I know." Franco's voice was quiet. "My father built this organization from nothing. He raised me to take over, trained me, shaped me into someone who could survive in this world. And by the time I was old enough to question whether I wanted it, I was already too deep to walk away." "You could walk away now. Could I?" He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I employ hundreds of people, support their families, protect territories that would turn into war zones without my control. If I walk away, everything collapses. And the people who replace me will be worse than I ever was. So you're trapped." "We're all trapped by something." Megan knew he was right, knew her own traps intimately. Fear, trauma, the constant awareness that safety was an illusion she'd never quite believe in again. "What would you do?" she asked. "If you could walk away? If none of this existed?" Franco thought about it for a long moment. "I'd open a restaurant," he said finally. "Nothing fancy, just good food and simple wine, somewhere people could come and forget their problems for a few hours." The answer surprised her. "Really?" "Really." My grandmother taught me to cook before she died. It's the only thing I've ever done that felt completely clean. He looked at her. What about you? I'd go back to nursing, but somewhere smaller, quieter. Somewhere I could actually know my patients' names instead of treating them like assembly line components. Why don't you? Because I'm here, because I'm broken, because I don't know if I'll ever be able to walk into a hospital again without remembering that parking lot. Franco's hand found hers in the darkness between them. His grip was warm, steady, anchoring. You're not broken, he said quietly. You're healing. There's a difference. Megan wanted to believe him, almost did. They sat there until dawn painted the hallway windows gold, hands linked, shoulders touching, two people trapped by different circumstances finding temporary refuge in each other's company. And when Megan finally went back to her room, she fell asleep without nightmares for the first time in months. Everything changed the night the alarms started screaming. Megan jolted awake to piercing sirens and red emergency lights strobing through her windows. Gunfire erupted somewhere below, close, too close. Glass shattered. Men shouted in Italian. Her door slammed open. Franco stood in the doorway, gun in one hand, phone in the other, his face carved from stone. Get up, he snapped. Now! Megan scrambled out of bed, heart hammering. What's happening? We're under attack. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the hallway. Stay close to me. Don't let go. They ran through corridors Megan barely recognized. Franco moving with the fluid certainty of someone who'd planned for exactly this scenario. Behind them, the gunfire intensified. Ahead, more of Franco's men appeared, forming a protective wall around them. Franco yanked open what looked like a normal closet door. Behind it, a steel staircase descended into darkness. Down, he ordered. Megan didn't argue. She took the stairs two at a time, Franco right behind her, his free hand on her shoulder guiding her through the blackness. The door slammed shut above them with a heavy clang that echoed like a tomb ceiling. Emergency lights flickered on, revealing a reinforced bunker that looked like something from a spy movie. Concrete walls, security monitors covering every angle of the estate, weapons racks. Enough supplies to survive a siege. What the hell is this? Megan gasped. Panic room. Franco was already moving to the monitors, scanning the feeds with sharp efficiency. Roberto must have... He stopped, swore viciously in Italian. What? Franco, what's happening? He turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, Megan saw fear in his eyes. It's not just an attack, Franco said quietly. It's an execution. Roberto hired mercenaries to storm the estate. He gestured at the monitors showing armed men systematically clearing rooms. He's not trying to escape. He's trying to kill both of us. Megan's knees went weak. She grabbed the edge of the desk to stay upright. Why? She whispered. Why me? Because you're a witness. Because you survived. Because as long as you're alive, you're proof of what he did. Franco's jaw tightened. And because hurting you hurts me. The admission hung between them, raw and unplanned. On the monitors, Franco's men engaged the mercenaries in brutal close-quarters combat. Blood splattered across marble floors. Bodies fell. Megan watched it all with the numb detachment of someone whose reality had fractured beyond repair. I'm sorry, Franco said softly. I thought you'd be safe here. I thought, stop. Megan cut him off. She turned to face him fully, something hardening in her chest. Stop apologizing. Stop protecting me like I'm made of glass. I survived 3 months in your brother's basement. I can survive this too. Megan, no. Listen to me. She stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion and guilt written across his features. I'm not some helpless victim you need to shield from reality. I know exactly how ugly the world is. I know exactly what men like Roberto are capable of. And I'm done being treated like I'm too fragile to handle the truth. Franco stared at her. What do you want from me? I want you to stop deciding my fate without asking me first. I want you to treat me like an equal instead of a problem to solve. Her voice cracked slightly. I want you to trust me the way I'm starting to trust you. Something shifted in Franco's expression. The walls he kept so carefully maintained crumbled just enough for Megan to see the man beneath the armor. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. The monitors showed Franco's men gaining ground, pushing the mercenaries back through the mansion. But the fight was far from over. Franco made a decision. When this is over, he said, I'm moving you somewhere safe, somewhere Roberto can't touch you. A new identity, a fresh start. Whatever you need. And you? I'll handle my brother, permanently this time. Megan should have felt relieved, should have felt grateful. Instead, all she felt was the crushing weight of certainty that once she left this bunker, whatever fragile connection she and Franco had built would shatter like everything else in her life. What if I don't want to leave? The words escaped before she could stop them. Franco's eyes widened slightly. What? What if I don't want a fresh start somewhere else? What if... She stopped, breathless and terrified and unable to take the words back. What if I want to stay here? With you? The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to name. On the monitors, the last mercenary fell. The alarms cut out. Silence rushed in like a wave. Franco crossed the distance between them in 2 steps. His hands cupped her face, gentle despite the violence still staining his clothes. You don't know what you're asking for, he said roughly. Yes, I do. This life, my life, it's dangerous, messy, wrong. I know. Megan, she kissed him. It was desperate and terrifying and completely insane, and Megan didn't care about any of it. She just needed to feel something other than fear, needed to prove to herself that she was still alive, still capable of wanting something beyond survival. Franco froze for half a heartbeat. Then he kissed her back with the intensity of a man who'd been holding back for weeks, his hands tangling in her hair, his body pressing against hers like an anchor in a storm. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Franco rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he whispered. I know, Megan whispered back. Above them, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Boss? Marco's voice filtered through the bunker's intercom. All clear. We got Roberto. Franco stepped back, but his hand found Megan's, fingers intertwining. Come on, he said. Let's finish this. Roberto was bleeding when they dragged him into Franco's study. Not enough to be life-threatening. Just enough to make a mess on the Persian rug Franco's mother had given him before she died. The irony wasn't lost on him. Family heirlooms destroyed by family betrayal. Megan stood in the doorway, Franco's hand still wrapped around hers, and watched 2 guards force Roberto into a chair. His face was swollen, one eye nearly shut, blood crusting around his nose and mouth. He looked smaller than she remembered, less terrifying, just a pathetic man who'd gambled everything and lost. You stupid son of a bitch, Franco said quietly. Roberto spat blood onto the floor. Fuck you. 18 men dead because of your tantrum. Half my estate shot to hell. And for what? Franco released Megan's hand and moved closer to his brother. Because you couldn't handle being told no? Because you chose her over me. Roberto's good eye fixed on Megan with pure hatred. Your own blood. And you picked some random bitch who... Franco's fist caught him across the jaw before he could finish. Roberto's head snapped sideways, more blood spraying. Don't, Franco said softly. Don't say another word about her. Megan's stomach churned. She should have felt satisfaction watching Roberto suffer, should have felt vindicated. Instead, all she felt was sick exhaustion and the creeping realization that violence only bred more violence, endlessly cycling until everyone drowned in it. Franco, she said quietly. He turned, and she saw the barely controlled rage burning in his eyes. This was the side of him she'd only glimpsed in fragments. The Mafia Boss who'd built an empire on fear and blood. The man who could kill without hesitation when pushed. It should have terrified her. It didn't. What do you want me to do with him? Franco asked. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Roberto was Franco's brother, his blood. In their world, that meant something. But Roberto had also tried to kill them both, had tortured her for months, had proven himself irredeemable in every way that mattered. Megan looked at the man who'd destroyed her life, looked at the fear flickering beneath his hatred, and realized something that surprised her. I don't care, she said, finally. Whatever you do to him won't give me back what he took. It won't erase the nightmares or make me whole again, so do whatever you have to do for your world. Just keep him away from me. Roberto laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. Coward, you're both fucking cowards. Franco nodded once at the guards. Take him to the cells. No food, no water, no visitors. I'll deal with him when I'm thinking clearly. They hauled Roberto to his feet. He struggled, screaming obscenities, until one of the guards pressed a gun to his temple and he went silent. The door slammed shut. Megan's knees buckled. Franco caught her before she hit the floor, strong arms wrapping around her waist, holding her upright when her own strength failed. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." "I should be stronger than this," Megan whispered. "I should be able to—" "You survived. That's enough." But it didn't feel like enough. Not when her hands were shaking and her heart was racing and the bunker kiss felt like it had happened a lifetime ago instead of 30 minutes. Franco guided her to the leather couch against the wall, poured her 2 fingers of whiskey from the crystal decanter on his desk, sat beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. "Drink," he ordered gently. Megan drank. The alcohol burned down her throat, sharp and grounding. "What happens now?" she asked. Franco was quiet for a long moment. "Now I figure out how to keep you safe while I clean up this mess." "You keep saying that. Keep acting like I'm something fragile you need to protect." "Because you are." "No." Megan set down the glass hard enough to make Franco flinch. "I'm not. I'm angry and traumatized and probably going to need years of therapy, but I'm not fragile. Stop treating me like I might shatter." "Then what do you want from me?" "The truth. All of it. No more careful explanations or edited versions designed to protect my delicate sensibilities." She turned to face him fully. "Tell me what Roberto said. Before tonight. What did he accuse you of?" Franco's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the destroyed gardens. Dawn was breaking over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. "He said I was weak," Franco admitted quietly. "Said I'd lost my edge. That I cared more about you than about the family business, and that made me vulnerable. Exploitable." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "And he was right." "About which part?" "All of it." Megan stood, crossing to where Franco stood rigid against the window. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on him. "You're not weak for caring about people," she said. "In this world I am." "Then maybe it's a fucked up world." Franco turned to look at her, something raw and exposed in his expression. "What do you want from me, Megan? Really want?" The question was dangerous, honest in a way that terrified her, because what she wanted was impossible. Wanted him to be someone other than who he was. Wanted a normal life that didn't involve gunfights and bunkers, and brothers who hired mercenaries. But she couldn't have that. Wouldn't ever have that again. So she told him the only truth that mattered. "I want you to let me stay. Not as a victim you're protecting. Not as a problem you're solving. As someone who chooses to be here." "Why?" "Because I don't know where else to go. Because the rest of the world feels like a foreign country I'll never belong to again." Her voice dropped. "Because when I'm with you, I don't feel broken." Franco's hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "Probably." He kissed her again. Slower this time, less desperate, like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth, the taste of whiskey on her breath, the way she leaned into him despite every logical reason not to. When they broke apart, Franco rested his forehead against hers. "Okay," he breathed. "Okay. You can stay. But we do this my way. New security protocols, no going anywhere without guards, no contact with the outside world until I know Roberto didn't have other people helping him." "How long?" "However long it takes." Megan nodded, accepting the terms even though they felt like a different kind of cage. But at least this cage had Franco in it. The next 3 days passed in organized chaos. Franco's people cleaned up the estate with military precision, removing bodies, repairing damage, scrubbing blood from marble floors until no evidence remained of the attack. Megan stayed in her clinic, treating wounded guards and trying not to think about how easily she'd adapted to being the personal physician for Chicago's criminal elite. Dr. Alvarez appeared on the second day, summoned by Franco to help with the more serious injuries. He took one look at Megan's makeshift surgical setup and raised an eyebrow. "Impressive work," he said, examining a guard whose shoulder she'd just finished debriding. "You're wasted on emergency medicine." "Am I still doing emergency medicine?" Alvarez smiled faintly. That depends on your definition. They worked side by side for hours, falling into the easy rhythm of medical professionals who understood each other without needing lengthy explanations. It was the most normal Megan had felt since the kidnapping, just two people trying to patch up broken bodies in a world that specialized in creating them. "How long have you worked for Franco?" she asked, while suturing a laceration on a guard named Vincent's forearm. 15 years, since he took over from his father. What's he like, really like, I mean, not the public version? Alvarez paused, considering the question carefully. Franco Ravellini is a complicated man trying to do the right thing in a world that punishes righteousness. He's killed people, ordered violence, built an empire on activities that would land most men in prison for life. He tied off a suture with practiced precision. But he's also the only reason this city hasn't descended into complete chaos. The previous regime, his father's regime, was brutal, arbitrary. Franco brought rules, structure, some semblance of honor to a fundamentally dishonorable business. Does that make it okay? No, but it makes it complicated. Vincent shifted under Megan's hands. "Boss saved my life twice," he said quietly. "Once from a bullet, once from myself when I was drinking everything I could get my hands on. Whatever he is to the rest of the world, he's family to us." Megan finished the last suture in silence. The word family kept echoing in her head, twisted and warped beyond recognition. Roberto was family too. Blood. And look what he'd done. Maybe biology didn't mean what people thought it did. Sheet. Franco found her that evening in the empty ballroom on the mansion's second floor. She was sitting in the middle of the polished hardwood, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the crystal chandelier overhead. The room smelled like dust and old money, and memories that didn't belong to her. "How'd you know I was here?" she asked without looking at him. "Lucia told me." Franco crossed the room and sat beside her, close but not touching. "She said you looked like you needed space. Lucia's perceptive. She raised me after my mother died. Perceptive doesn't begin to cover it." They sat in silence for a while, two people trying to figure out how to exist in the aftermath of violence. "I've been thinking," Megan said finally, "about what happens after this. After Roberto. After everything. And I don't know if I can go back to being who I was before. That version of Megan Turner died in a basement 3 months ago, and I don't know who this new version is supposed to be." Franco was quiet for a long moment. "I think you're whoever you choose to be." That's a very optimistic take for a mafia boss. "I have my moments." Megan laughed despite herself. Then the laughter turned into something else, something raw and painful that clawed its way up from the hollow place in her chest. She pressed her face against her knees, shoulders shaking, trying desperately to hold herself together. Franco's hand settled on her back, warm and steady. "It's okay," he said softly. "Let it out." "I can't. If I start crying, I won't stop." "Then don't stop." The permission broke something inside her. Megan sobbed, deep, wrenching sounds that echoed through the empty ballroom. All the fear and rage and grief she'd been holding back for months poured out in an unstoppable flood. Franco just held her. Didn't try to fix it or minimize it or tell her everything would be okay. Just sat with her in the wreckage of her composure and let her fall apart without judgment. When the storm finally passed, Megan felt hollowed out, empty, but somehow lighter. "Sorry," she mumbled into her knees. "Don't apologize for being human. I'm a mess. We're all messes. Some of us are just better at hiding it." Megan lifted her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Franco looked tired, bone-deep exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. "What about you?" she asked. "When do you get to fall apart?" "I don't. Can't afford to." "That's not sustainable." "Neither is running a criminal empire, but here we are." The honesty surprised her. Franco never talked about himself, never revealed the cracks in his carefully maintained armor. But something about this moment, this room, this fragile connection between them, made him willing to be vulnerable. "Tell me something," Megan said. "Tell me one thing about yourself that nobody else knows." Franco considered this. "I hate what I do, every day, every decision, every compromise that chips away another piece of my soul. I hate it all." "Then why keep doing it?" Because stopping would create a power vacuum that would get hundreds of people killed. Because the alternatives are worse than me. Because I inherited this responsibility and I don't know how to walk away from it without blood on my hands. He looked at her. Because until very recently, I didn't have anything worth walking away for. The implication hung between them, dangerous and undeniable. Franco, I know. I know it's insane. I know we barely know each other. I know the circumstances are fucked up beyond repair. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. But I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting to protect you. Can't stop imagining what it would be like if we were different people in a different world. Megan's heart hammered against her ribs. What would you do? In that different world, take you to dinner, normal dinner, at a normal restaurant, where the biggest decision we'd make is whether to order wine or beer. He smiled faintly. Ask you about your favorite books, your worst patients, what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old, all the boring, normal things people do when they're trying to fall in love. We can still do those things. Can we? Really? Franco gestured at the mansion around them. This is my world, Megan. Bodyguards and bunkers and brothers who try to kill us. I can't give you normal. Can't even promise you safe. I don't want safe. Not anymore. Megan shifted closer, close enough that their shoulders touched. Safe is an illusion I stopped believing in the night Roberto's needle hit my neck. All I want is honest. Honest I can do. Then be honest with me now. What happens to Roberto? Franco's expression shuddered. Don't ask me that. Why not? Because you won't like the answer. Tell me anyway. He stood abruptly, pacing across the ballroom with barely controlled tension. In my world, there are rules. Codes that keep the violence from spiraling completely out of control. One of those rules is that you don't betray family. And when you do, when you cross that line, there are consequences. What kind of consequences? Franco stopped pacing, turned to face her with eyes that held no mercy. The permanent kind. Understanding crashed over Megan like cold water. You're going to kill him. Yes. When? Soon, before word spreads that my own brother tried to murder me and survived. Because if other families think I'm weak, if they think I won't enforce my own rules, they'll come for me. For you. For everyone I care about. The logic was cold and brutal and undeniable. Megan understood it intellectually. But emotionally, the thought of Franco executing his own brother made her stomach turn. There has to be another way, she said. There isn't. Franco, do you know what he did? What he really did? Franco's voice hardened. While you were chained in that basement, Roberto would come down and describe in detail all the things he was planning to do to you once he broke you completely. He recorded it, saved it on his phone like some kind of trophy. My men found the recordings when they searched his house. Megan's vision swam. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting nausea. I'm sorry, Franco said quietly. I didn't want to tell you, didn't want you to carry that, but you need to understand why I can't let him live. Have you listened to them? The recordings? No, I destroyed them the second I found out they existed. But my men, the ones who did listen, said it was the worst thing they'd ever heard. And these are men who've seen things that would give normal people nightmares for life. The ballroom spun around her. Megan grabbed the edge of a nearby chair, forcing herself to breathe through the panic clawing at her throat. Roberto hadn't just kidnapped her, hadn't just imprisoned her. He'd fantasized about worse, planned worse. And the only reason she'd survived was because Franco's raid happened before Roberto decided she was broken enough for whatever he'd imagined. I'm going to be sick, she whispered. Franco was beside her in an instant, guiding her to a bathroom off the ballroom. She made it to the toilet just in time, retching violently, while Franco held her hair back and murmured things she couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. When it finally stopped, she slumped against the cool tile, trembling. I'm sorry, Franco said again. I shouldn't have told you. No, you should have. Megan's voice was hoarse. I asked for honesty. That's what honest looks like in your world. He sat beside her on the bathroom floor, both of them slumped against the wall like teenagers hiding from a party they didn't want to attend. I don't want to be this person, Franco said quietly. Don't want to be someone who executes his own brother. But I don't see another choice. There's always a choice. Is there? Really? He looked at her. You're a nurse. If you had a patient with gangrene spreading through their leg, what would you do? Amputate. Exactly. You'd cut away the infected tissue to save the rest of the body. Franco's jaw tightened. Roberto is the infection, and if I don't remove him, he'll destroy everything. The comparison was clinical, brutal, and completely accurate. Megan hated that she understood it. When? She asked again. Tomorrow night. Quick. Private. As merciful as I can make it under the circumstances. Will you tell him why? I'll tell him he betrayed the family, broke the rules, that this is the consequence. Will he understand? Roberto never understood anything except what he wanted. Franco's voice was heavy with old grief. When we were kids, I used to protect him, take the blame when he fucked up, cover for him when our father got violent. I thought I was helping, thought I was being a good brother. He laughed bitterly. All I did was teach him that actions don't have consequences, that he could do whatever he wanted and someone would always clean up his mess. This isn't your fault, isn't it? I made him what he is, my protection, my enabling. My refusal to let our father discipline him the way he deserved. Franco's hands curled into fists. I spent 30 years creating the monster who tortured you. So yeah, this is absolutely my fault. Megan didn't have an answer for that. Didn't have words of comfort or absolution. She just reached for his hand, linking their fingers together in the quiet space between them. They sat there on the bathroom floor for a long time, holding hands like lifelines. Two broken people trying to figure out how to survive the aftermath of choices neither of them could take back. The next day passed in tense anticipation. Franco disappeared into meetings with his lieutenants, coordinating security upgrades and damage control. Megan stayed in her clinic, organizing supplies with obsessive precision because focusing on inventory counts meant she didn't have to think about what was going to happen that night. Lucia found her around noon, carrying a tray with lunch Megan hadn't asked for. You need to eat, the older woman said, setting the tray on Megan's desk. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. It wasn't a suggestion. Megan picked up the sandwich, forcing herself to take small bites that tasted like cardboard. Lucia watched her with sharp, knowing eyes. You're thinking about Roberto. How did you? I've worked for this family for 40 years. I know what execution day looks like. Megan set down the sandwich. Does it bother you? What Franco's going to do? Roberto tried to kill you both. In my world, that's not complicated. But he's Franco's brother. And you're Franco's... Lucia paused, choosing her words carefully. You're important to him. More important than he's allowed anyone to be in a very long time. Roberto threatened that. Consequences follow. It all seems so cold. It's survival. Lucia sat down across from her, hands folded in her lap. This life, Franco's life, it doesn't allow for mercy. Not the way normal people understand it. Every decision is a calculation. Every relationship is a potential weakness. Franco learned that young, and it nearly destroyed him. What do you mean? Lucia was quiet for a moment, deciding how much to reveal. When Franco was 16, he fell in love with a girl from the neighborhood. Sweet thing, normal family, no connections to our world. His father found out and had her family threatened until they moved to another state. Told Franco that love was a luxury he couldn't afford, that caring about people made him vulnerable. Megan's chest tightened. What happened? Franco shut himself down, stopped feeling, became the perfect soldier his father wanted, cold, efficient, ruthless when necessary. Lucia met her eyes. Until you. We're not. Yes, you are. And Franco knows it. That's why he's so desperate to keep you safe. Because you're the first person in 24 years who made him feel something other than duty. The weight of that revelation pressed down on Megan's shoulders. She wasn't ready for it. Wasn't prepared to be someone's reason for hope in a hopeless world. What if I can't be that for him? She whispered. What if I'm too broken to be anyone's salvation? Lucia's expression softened. Nobody's asking you to save him, child. He's asking you to survive with him. There's a difference. Franco came to her room that evening just after sunset. Megan was sitting by the window, watching darkness swallow the city, when she heard his quiet knock. Come in, she called. He entered looking exhausted, worn down by choices he'd already made and ones he was about to make. His suit was perfectly pressed, but there was something disheveled about him, some internal disorder that pressed through despite his controlled exterior. "It's time," he said quietly. Megan's stomach dropped. "Already?" "Waiting won't make it easier." "Do you want me there?" Franco shook his head. "No, this is something I need to do alone." "Okay." He crossed to where she sat, dropping to one knee so they were eye level. His hands found hers, warm and solid and trembling just slightly. "After tonight, everything changes," he said. "I need you to understand that. Roberto's death will send ripples through the entire organization. Some people will see it as strength. Others will see it as the first crack in my foundation. Things might get dangerous before they get better." "More dangerous than a basement in a bunker?" "Different dangerous." Megan squeezed his hands. "I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now. I mean it. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Wasn't that the deal?" Something fragile and hopeful flickered across Franco's features. "Yeah, that was the deal." He stood but didn't let go of her hands. Didn't move toward the door. "Franco?" Megan prompted gently. "What is it?" "I've killed people before. More than I can count. It's part of this life. Part of what I am." His voice was barely above a whisper. "But I've never killed family, and I'm terrified of what that's going to do to me." Megan stood too, closing the distance between them. She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath the expensive fabric. "Then don't do it," she said. "I have to." "No, you don't. You could exile him, lock him up, hand him over to the feds with enough evidence to put him away for life. There are options that don't involve pulling the trigger yourself." Franco's hand covered hers, holding it against his chest. "And what happens when he escapes? When he bribes a guard or calls in favors or manipulates his way back into circulation? What happens when he comes for you again? Then we deal with it then. I can't take that risk." "You mean you won't take that risk?" Franco's jaw tightened. "What's the difference?" "One is about logic. The other is about fear." Megan held his gaze. "You're not executing Roberto because it's the smart choice. You're executing him because you're terrified of what happens if you don't. And fear makes people do things they regret for the rest of their lives." "This isn't about fear." "Yes, it is. You're afraid of looking weak, afraid of losing control, afraid that if you show mercy one time, your entire empire crumbles." She softened her voice. "But Franco, you're not your father. You don't have to rule the same way he did. My father kept order for 40 years. And died alone in a hospital bed with nobody at his funeral, except people who were paid to be there. Is that really the legacy you want?" The words hit harder than Megan intended. Franco flinched, pulling back slightly. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That was true." Franco's voice was hollow. "That was true. My father died exactly like that. And for years I told myself I'd be different, better, more than just the sum of his violence." He laughed bitterly. "Look how well that worked out. You are different. You saved me when Roberto destroyed me. You're trying to build something better even though you don't know how. That's not your father. That's you." Franco searched her face like he was looking for permission to believe her. "What if you're wrong? What if I let Roberto live and he comes back and hurts you?" "Then I'll survive it, the same way I survived the basement." "I can't lose you." The admission hung between them, raw and terrified. Megan cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You won't lose me by choosing mercy. You'll lose me by becoming someone I can't recognize. Even if that someone keeps you safe." "Especially then." Franco closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man drowning. When he opened them again, something had shifted, some fundamental decision made in the space between heartbeats. "Okay," he breathed. "Okay, I'll find another way." Relief flooded through Megan's chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I don't know what the other way is. Just that it's not a bullet. We'll figure it out." "We," Franco repeated quietly. "I'm not used to that word." "Get used to it." He kissed her then, slow and deep and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of hope before reality ripped it away again. When they broke apart, Franco rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he said. I don't mean just stay. I don't want to be alone." "Okay." They ended up on Megan's bed, fully clothed, wrapped around each other in the darkness. Franco's hand traced absent patterns on her back while she listened to his heartbeat gradually slow from panicked to merely anxious. "Tell me something good," she murmured against his chest. "Tell me one good memory from before all this." Franco was quiet for so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then his voice came through the darkness, soft and careful. "When I was 8, my grandmother took me to Italy for the summer, just the two of us. My father was furious, thought it made me soft to spend time away from the business. But my grandmother didn't care what he thought." Franco's chest rose and fell beneath her. "She taught me to make pasta from scratch, took me to old churches and told me stories about saints and sinners and how sometimes you couldn't tell the difference. Let me be a kid for 3 months before reality dragged me back. She sounds wonderful. She was the best person I've ever known. Died when I was 12. Heart attack at the kitchen table while she was making Sunday dinner." His arm tightened around Megan. "I think about her sometimes. Wonder what she'd think of the man I became. I think she'd be proud that you're trying, or ashamed that I haven't tried harder." Megan tilted her head up to look at him in the darkness. "You saved my life. You're choosing mercy over revenge. You're attempting to be better than the people who raised you. That's not nothing, Franco. It's not enough. Maybe enough is a moving target. Maybe we're all just doing the best we can with what we've got." Franco's fingers tangled in her hair, gentle and possessive at the same time. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the same time I got kidnapped and tortured. Trauma really clarifies your priorities." He laughed. Actually laughed, and Megan felt the sound vibrate through his chest into hers. They fell asleep like that, tangled together in the darkness, two people clinging to each other against the weight of a world that wanted to tear them apart. The alarm jerked Megan awake at 3 a.m. Not the estate alarm. Her body's alarm. The one that screamed danger even when logic said she was safe. She sat up gasping, Franco's arm still wrapped around her waist, and tried to remember where she was. Not the basement. Not chains. Not darkness. Franco's room. Franco's bed. Franco's warmth beside her. Safe. The word felt like a lie. "Nightmare." Franco's voice was rough with sleep. Something like that. He pulled her back down against him, his hand making slow circles on her back. "Want to talk about it?" "No, just stay with me, please. I'm not going anywhere." But even as he said it, Megan felt the distance growing between them. Not physical distance, something worse. The gap between what they wanted to be and what the world demanded they become. Franco had agreed not to kill Roberto. But that didn't solve the fundamental problem. His brother was a monster who would never stop trying to hurt them. And eventually, mercy would run out. Eventually, Franco would have to choose between her and his code, and Megan wasn't sure which way that choice would fall. She lay awake in the darkness, listening to Franco's breathing even out into sleep, and wondered if loving him was the bravest thing she'd ever done or the stupidest. Probably both. Morning came too quickly. Megan woke to find Franco already gone, his side of the bed cold. A note on the pillow read, "Meeting with the council. Back by noon. Stay inside. F. The council." That's what Franco called his inner circle of lieutenants and advisors, the men who'd helped him build an empire and would destroy anyone who threatened it, including, presumably, a mafia boss who went soft over a woman. Megan dressed in yesterday's clothes and made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee to the kitchen. Lucia was already there, orchestrating breakfast for what looked like an army. "Good morning," the older woman said without looking up from the stove. "I assume you're hungry after your night with Franco." Megan's face heated. I didn't ask." Lucia slid a plate of eggs and toast across the counter. "Eat. You look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't. Not really." "Nightmares?" "Constantly." Lucia poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from her. "They'll fade eventually. The nightmares, the fear. All of it scars over if you give it time." "How do you know?" "Because I've seen it happen. This world breaks people. But the ones who survive, really survive. They find ways to make the broken pieces into something new." Lucia's eyes were sharp over the rim of her coffee cup. "Question is whether you're strong enough to do that." "I don't feel strong." Nobody who's actually strong ever does. They sat in companionable silence while Megan forced down breakfast. The eggs tasted like paste, but she ate them anyway, knowing Lucia would guilt her into it eventually. "What's the council meeting about?" she asked finally. Lucia's expression closed off. "That's not my business to share. But you know." "Of course I know. I've worked for this family since before Franco was born. I know everything." She stood collecting dishes. "But knowing and telling are different things. If Franco wants you informed, he'll inform you." The dismissal was gentle but absolute. Megan let it go, recognizing when she'd hit a wall. She spent the morning in her clinic, reorganizing supplies that didn't need reorganizing just to keep her hands busy. A few guards filtered through with minor injuries, split knuckles, strained muscles, a black eye that looked suspiciously fresh. Nobody mentioned the council meeting. Nobody mentioned Roberto. The silence was deliberate and heavy. Around 11, Marco appeared in her doorway. "Boss wants to see you," he said without preamble. Megan's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong? Just come with me." She followed him through corridors that felt more like a maze every day, ending up in Franco's study. The room was crowded with men she didn't recognize, hard faces and harder eyes, all turning to assess her when she entered. Franco stood behind his desk, every inch the Mafia Boss she sometimes forgot he was. Cold, controlled, radiating authority that made strong men flinch. "Megan," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "thank you for coming. What's going on? The council has some concerns. About you, about us, about my judgment." Franco's jaw was tight. "They deserve answers." One of the men, older with silver hair and scars that told stories Megan didn't want to know, stepped forward. "Miss Turner," he said, his accent thick with old country Italian. "My name is Salvatore. I've known Franco since he was a boy. Watched him build this organization into something his father could never have imagined." He paused. "And now I'm watching him tear it apart over a woman he barely knows." "Salvatore," Franco started. "No, let me finish." Salvatore's gaze locked on Megan. "You've been here what? A month? 6 weeks? And in that time, Franco has defied tradition, alienated allies, and refused to execute his own brother for crimes that demand blood. All because of you." Megan's hands curled into fists. "I never asked him to do any of that." "You didn't have to. Your presence is asking for you." Salvatore's voice hardened. "You're a weakness, a liability. And in our world, liabilities get people killed. Then I'll leave." "You think it's that simple?" Another man spoke up, younger, with cold eyes and a gun barely concealed under his jacket. "You've seen too much, know too much. You don't just walk away from this family." Fear spiked through Megan's chest. "What are you saying?" Franco moved around the desk, positioning himself between her and the council. "Nobody threatens her. That's not what this meeting is about." "Then what is it about?" Salvatore demanded. "Because from where we're standing, you've lost your edge. Your brother tried to kill you both and he's still breathing. That sends a message, Franco. And it's not the message this organization needs right now. I'll handle Roberto my way. Your way is mercy. Mercy will destroy us." The room erupted into arguments, voices overlapping, hands gesturing, tension ratcheting up with every passing second. Megan stood frozen, watching Franco defend choices he'd made because of her, and felt the crushing weight of responsibility settle across her shoulders. This was her fault. All of it. Her presence had destabilized everything Franco had built. Her survival was costing him his empire. Maybe Salvatore was right. Maybe she was a liability that would get everyone killed. Franco's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Enough!" The room went silent. "I understand your concerns," Franco said, his voice deadly calm. "But Megan stays. Roberto lives. And anyone who has a problem with those decisions can leave. Now. With my blessing. No reprisals. No consequences." Nobody moved. "That's what I thought." Franco's gaze swept the room. "I've given 20 years to this organization, bled for it, killed for it, built it into something stronger than my father ever imagined. And I'm not throwing that away. But I'm also not sacrificing the one good thing in my life just because you're afraid of change." "This isn't about fear," Salvatore started. "Yes, it is. You're terrified that mercy makes us weak, that emotions compromise judgment, that caring about someone opens the door to vulnerability." Franco's voice softened just slightly. But strength without compassion is just brutality, and I refuse to become my father. The words hung in the air, challenging anyone to argue. Nobody did. Salvatore studied Franco for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. You're the boss. We follow your lead. But if this blows up in our faces, it won't. It better not. The council filed out one by one until only Marco remained, standing guard by the door. Franco turned to Megan, exhaustion written across every line of his face. I'm sorry. They had no right. They had every right. Megan's voice shook. They're trying to protect you, protect the organization, and I'm the thing putting both at risk. You're not a thing, you're a person, and you deserve to be treated like one.
Do I? Really? She laughed bitterly. What have I done to deserve anything except the basement Roberto put me in? I'm nobody. Just a random nurse who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Stop. It's true. I said stop. Franco crossed to her, hands gripping her shoulders. You survived torture that would have broken most people. You rebuilt yourself in the middle of my chaos. You made me want to be better than I am. That's not nothing, Megan. That's everything.
Tears burned behind her eyes. I don't know how to be someone's everything. Then just be mine. He kissed her, desperate and demanding and completely inappropriate given that Marco was still standing 3 feet away. Megan didn't care. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her fear and gratitude and tentative hope into the connection between them. When they broke apart, Franco rested his forehead against hers. We're going to get through this, he promised. How can you be sure? Because the alternative is unacceptable. That night, Roberto escaped. The alarm started at 2 a.m., screaming through the mansion with renewed fury. Megan bolted awake in her own room. Franco had returned her there after the council meeting, claiming he needed space to think, and ran toward the sound of shouting voices and running feet. She found Franco in the security control room, surrounded by monitors showing empty cells and broken locks. How? He was demanding of the guards. How the fuck did this happen? Don't know, boss. The feeds were looped. Someone on the inside helped him. Franco's fist slammed into the desk, hard enough to crack the wood. Find him. Tear this city apart if you have to, but find my brother before he disappears. Megan stepped into the room. Franco. He turned, and the look in his eyes made her step back. Pure rage. Cold calculation. The Mafia Boss stripped of all pretense. Stay in your room, he ordered. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Lucia.
What are you going to do?
What I should have done weeks ago. He pushed past her, Marco and half a dozen armed men following. Megan stood frozen in the hallway, listening to doors slam and engines roar to life. Roberto was loose, somewhere in Chicago, angry and violent and completely unhinged, and it was only a matter of time before he came for her again. Megan made it back to her room, locked the door like Franco ordered, and slid down against it until she was sitting on the floor. This was the point of no return. The moment when mercy stopped being an option and survival became the only thing that mattered. Franco would find Roberto, would execute him this time without hesitation, and Megan would have to live with the knowledge that she'd tried to save a monster who didn't deserve saving. She pressed her face against her knees and waited for the world to end. 3 hours passed in suffocating silence. Megan sat on her bedroom floor with her back pressed against the locked door, knees drawn to her chest, listening to the house settle around her. Every creak of wood sounded like footsteps. Every distant voice sounded like Roberto's laugh echoing from the basement. Her phone sat useless on the nightstand. Franco had made her memorize his number weeks ago, emergency protocol he'd insisted on, but calling felt wrong. He was hunting his brother through Chicago's underbelly, and she'd be nothing but a distraction. So she waited, and tried not to think about what Franco would look like when he finally pulled the trigger. The knock on her door came at 5 a.m., gentle but firm. Megan, it's Lucia. Open up. Relief flooded through her. Megan scrambled to her feet and unlocked the door. Lucia stood in the hallway with a tray, coffee, toast, and the kind of maternal concern that made Megan's chest ache. The older woman took one look at her and sighed. You haven't slept. Can't. Not until Franco gets back. Then at least eat something. Lucia pushed past her into the room, setting the tray on the small table by the window. Starving yourself won't make him return faster. Megan sat obediently, wrapping her hands around the coffee cup for warmth she didn't really need. Have you heard anything? Marco called 20 minutes ago. They found Roberto's trail, some dive bar on the south side where he was spotted drinking with known associates. Lucia's mouth tightened. Franco's closing in. Good. Is it? Lucia settled into the chair across from her. You wanted Franco to show mercy, to find another way. And now you're relieved he's hunting Roberto like an animal? The accusation stung because it was true. Megan had spent yesterday convincing Franco that execution wasn't the answer, that mercy mattered, that becoming his father's son would destroy him. And now she wanted Roberto dead with a viciousness that terrified her. I was wrong, she said quietly, about the mercy, about all of it. Roberto's a monster who'll never stop coming for us. Franco was right to want him dead from the beginning. Maybe, or maybe you were both right and both wrong, and this whole situation is just fucked beyond repair. Lucia poured herself coffee. That's the thing about this life. There are no clean answers, just choices that hurt less than the alternatives. How do you live with it? The violence? The constant fear? You build walls. Convince yourself the people Franco hurts deserve it. Tell yourself it's necessary for survival. Lucia's eyes were distant. And some days you almost believe it. Before Megan could respond, her phone buzzed. Franco's name flashed across the screen. She grabbed it. Hello? We found him. Franco's voice was tight, controlled fury barely leashed. Or rather, he found us. Megan's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Roberto's at the estate. Right now. He walked through the front door 20 minutes ago and surrendered to the guards. That doesn't make sense. Why would he? I don't know, but I'm 5 minutes out. Stay in your room with Lucia until I get there. The line went dead. Megan stared at the phone, her mind racing through possibilities and finding nothing that made sense. Roberto had escaped. Had freedom. Why the hell would he willingly walk back into Franco's hands? Something's wrong, she whispered. Lucia was already standing, moving toward the door. Stay here. Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone. Where are you going? To find out what game Roberto's playing before Franco walks into it blind. She disappeared into the hallway. Megan locked the door and pressed her ear against the wood, straining to hear anything over the pounding of her own heart. Voices filtered up from the floor below, muffled, indistinct, then louder, angrier, shouting. Megan grabbed her phone and texted Franco. Something's wrong. Lucia went to check on Roberto. Voices downstairs sound bad. No response. She counted seconds. Got to 47 before the gunshot cracked through the mansion like thunder. Megan's hand was on the doorknob before conscious thought caught up. Every survival instinct screamed at her to stay hidden, stay safe. Let Franco's people handle whatever was happening. But that was Lucia down there, the woman who'd fed her and protected her and treated her like family when she had no one. Megan unlocked the door and ran. The hallway was empty. She took the stairs 2 at a time, following the sound of voices to Franco's study. The door stood open, spilling light and chaos into the corridor. She skidded to a stop in the doorway, and her entire world tilted sideways. Roberto stood in the center of the room, hands zip-tied in front of him, blood trickling from a split lip. But he was smiling, actually smiling, because Lucia was on her knees beside him, a gun pressed to her temple by a man Megan recognized from the council meeting. Salvatore. Ah, Miss Turner, Salvatore said pleasantly, like they'd run into each other at a cocktail party. Perfect timing. Come in. Shut the door. Megan's feet moved on autopilot. The door clicked shut behind her. What the fuck is this? She managed. This is the consequence of Franco's weakness. Salvatore's voice was calm, reasonable, terrifying in its certainty. He chose you over the family, chose mercy over strength, and now the family is correcting that mistake. You're betraying him. No, I'm saving him from himself. Salvatore gestured with his free hand. Roberto contacted me after he escaped, explained the situation, offered a partnership that makes considerably more sense than Franco's current trajectory. Roberto's smile widened. Told you, Salvatore. She's the poison. Remove her and Franco goes back to being the boss we need. Understanding crashed over Megan in sickening waves. This wasn't Roberto acting alone. This was a coordinated coup. The council turning on Franco because he'd chosen her over their code. Franco will kill you for this, she said. Franco won't get the chance. Salvatore pressed the gun harder against Lucia's head. The older woman didn't flinch. When he arrives, he'll find his housekeeper dead and his girlfriend bleeding out. And in his grief, he'll understand that mercy has consequences, that attachments make us vulnerable, that I was right all along. You're insane. I'm practical. There's a difference. Lucia's eyes met Megan's across the room. In them, Megan saw no fear, just resigned acceptance and something that looked almost like apology. Run, Lucia said quietly. I'm not leaving you. Run. Salvatore's finger tightened on the trigger. The door exploded inward. Franco came through like a force of nature, gun raised, Marco and 4 other men flanking him. He took in the scene with one sweeping glance. Lucia on her knees, Salvatore's weapon, Roberto's smirk, Megan frozen by the door. His gun swung toward Salvatore. Let her go. Can't do that, boss. Salvatore's voice remained eerily calm. This has gone too far to stop now. You've compromised everything your father built, made us weak. The only way forward is through blood. You want blood? Franco's voice dropped to something cold and deadly. Touch Lucia and you'll drown in it. Big words from a man who can't even execute his own brother. Watch me. Franco's gun shifted toward Roberto. Roberto's smile finally faltered. Franco, wait. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Franco's hand was rock steady. Waiting for me to prove I'm still the monster Dad trained, still capable of putting family first. His finger moved to the trigger. Congratulations. You finally pushed hard enough. Don't. Roberto's voice cracked. Please, Franco, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. Just don't. Should have thought of that before you tortured the woman I love. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Love. Franco had never said it before. Never let the word pass his lips despite all the implications, all the midnight conversations, all the careful protection. And he'd chosen this moment, this violent, chaotic moment, to say it out loud. Megan's heart shattered and soared simultaneously. Salvatore laughed, harsh and bitter. There it is, the admission we've all been waiting for. You love her more than this family, more than everything we've built. Yes. Franco didn't look away from Roberto. I do, and that's not weakness. That's the first honest thing I've felt in 20 years. Then you're more lost than I thought. Salvatore pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Lucia crumpled sideways, blood blooming across her shoulder. Not a kill shot. Deliberate. A message. Franco's restraint evaporated. He put 3 bullets in Salvatore before the older man could adjust his aim. The traitor collapsed, his gun clattering across the hardwood floor. Roberto bolted. Zip-tied hands and all, he ran for the window. Got maybe 6 feet before Marco tackled him to the ground, slamming him face first into the rug with enough force to crack bone. Megan ran to Lucia, dropping to her knees beside the bleeding woman. Her nurse training kicked in automatically. Assess the wound, apply pressure, stem the bleeding. Shoulder, Lucia gasped. Through and through, I've had worse. Stop talking. Save your strength. Franco was beside them in seconds, phone already pressed to his ear. Dr. Alvarez, now. Gunshot wound, upper left shoulder. Yes, the estate. 5 minutes or I'm coming to get you myself. He knelt across from Megan, hands hovering over Lucia, like he didn't know what to do with them. The cold, calculating Mafia Boss had vanished. In his place was just a man watching someone he cared about bleed. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. Lucia, I'm so sorry. Shut up and let the girl work. But Lucia's hand found his, squeezing weakly. I'm not dying from 1 bullet, boy. Takes more than that to kill me. Megan pressed her jacket against the wound, applying steady pressure. The bleeding was bad, but manageable. Lucia was right. She'd survive this. Probably. If infection didn't set in, if the bullet hadn't nicked an artery, if Dr. Alvarez got here in time. Too many ifs. Behind them, Roberto was screaming obscenities while Marco and the other guards secured him with actual chains this time. Salvatore's body lay cooling in an expanding pool of blood. The study looked like a war zone. Megan. Franco's voice pulled her attention. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. You're sure? Franco, I'm fine. Focus on Lucia. He nodded, but his eyes kept darting back to her, like he needed constant confirmation she was still breathing. Dr. Alvarez arrived in under 4 minutes, crashing through the door with 2 assistants and enough medical equipment to perform surgery on the spot. He took one look at the scene and didn't even blink. Move, he ordered Megan. She moved. Alvarez worked with brutal efficiency, cutting away Lucia's blood-soaked shirt, irrigating the wound, packing it with gauze. His assistant set up an IV line, started fluids, prepared instruments. Franco stood 3 feet away, hands clenched into fists, watching every movement with desperate intensity. She'll need surgery, Alvarez announced after 2 minutes of examination. But she's stable. We can move her to the medical suite. Relief crashed over Franco's features. Do it. They carried Lucia out on a stretcher, Alvarez barking orders to his assistants. Franco moved to follow, but Marco caught his arm. Boss? Roberto. Franco turned slowly. His brother was chained to a support beam, face swollen and bleeding, all bravado stripped away. I didn't know Salvatore would shoot her, Roberto said quickly. I swear, Franco, that wasn't part of the plan. He was just supposed to scare you, make you understand. Shut up. Franco, please. I said shut the fuck up. Franco crossed the room with predatory calm. You orchestrated a coup. Turned my own counsel against me, got Lucia shot. And you want me to believe you didn't know people would get hurt? I thought you'd see reason. Thought you'd choose the family over some random bitch. Franco's fist caught Roberto's jaw with sickening force. His brother's head snapped back against the beam hard enough to leave a dent in the wood. Don't. Franco's voice was barely above a whisper. Don't call her that again. Roberto spat blood. She's made you weak, made you sentimental, made you everything Dad warned us not to become. Good, because Dad was a monster who died alone and unmourned, and I'd rather be weak with Megan than strong like him. Then you're not fit to lead this family. You're right. Franco stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I'm not. Not anymore. Not the way Dad would have wanted. Not the way you need me to be. He looked at Roberto with something that might have been pity. But I'm also not the man who's going to execute you in cold blood. Because despite everything, despite the torture and the coup and Lucia bleeding in my medical suite, you're still my brother. And some part of me still remembers when that meant something. Roberto's expression shifted from fear to calculation. So you're letting me go? No. I'm handing you over to the feds with enough evidence to put you away for the rest of your life. You wanted to see me choose between you and my code? Congratulations. I'm choosing a third option. Franco's voice hardened. You'll live in a federal prison, alone, with decades to think about what you destroyed. You can't, the organization will survive. The part's worth saving anyway. The rest can burn. Franco turned to Marco. Get him out of my sight. Transfer him to the secure location on the waterfront. I'll contact our federal liaison in the morning. Boss? Do it. Marco hesitated, then nodded. He and 2 other guards unlocked Roberto from the beam and dragged him toward the door. Roberto screamed the whole way, hurling threats and curses that echoed through the mansion long after he disappeared from view. Silence settled over the study like ash. Franco stood in the middle of the blood-stained room, shoulders slumped, looking more exhausted than Megan had ever seen him. Franco, she said quietly. He didn't turn around. You should go. Pack your things. I'll arrange transportation to anywhere you want. New identity, new life. Enough money to start over anywhere in the world. Megan's stomach dropped. What? You were right to try to leave before. Right to want out of this nightmare. His voice was hollow. I convinced you to stay and look what happened. Salvatore, Lucia, Roberto's coup. You almost died tonight because I was selfish enough to want you here. I'm not leaving. Megan, I'm not leaving, she repeated, crossing to where he stood. You don't get to make that decision for me. Franco finally turned to face her. His eyes were red-rimmed, haunted. I can't protect you, can't even protect my own people. Lucia almost died because of my choices. Lucia almost died because Salvatore was a traitor, and Roberto's a monster. That's not on you. Everything that happens in this organization is on me. That's what it means to be boss. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. And I can't watch you die because of my failures. I can't, Megan. It would break me. Then don't let me die. Let me stay and fight beside you instead of hiding me away like something fragile. You are fragile. You're human, and this world eats humans alive. Then maybe it's time to change the world. Franco laughed bitterly. You think I haven't tried? You think I haven't spent 20 years attempting to make this empire into something less brutal? It doesn't work. The violence always comes back. The darkness always wins. Not if we're stronger than the darkness. We're not. We could be. Franco's hands dropped from her face. He stepped back, putting distance between them. You don't understand what you're asking for. Staying means becoming part of this life permanently. Means watching people die and making impossible choices and compromising every principle you thought you had. Means becoming someone you won't recognize in the mirror. I stopped recognizing myself the day Roberto's needle hit my neck. At least here, the monster I'm becoming is one I'm choosing. That's not a choice. That's Stockholm Syndrome. The words hit like a slap. Megan recoiled. You think I'm traumatized into loving you? I think you're confused, grateful, dependent on the person who saved you. Franco's voice was gentle, but devastating. And I think if you stayed, eventually you'd realize that and hate me for letting you. You're wrong. Am I? Really? He gestured at the blood-stained study. Look around, Megan. This is my world. Violence and betrayal in bodies on expensive rugs. You're a nurse who wanted to help people. You don't belong here. I belong wherever I choose to belong. Even if that choice destroys you. Even then. Franco stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens. Dawn was breaking over Chicago again, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. I killed Salvatore without hesitation, he said quietly. Didn't even think about it. Just pulled the trigger and watched him die. And I didn't feel anything except satisfaction that he couldn't hurt you anymore. He pressed his forehead against the glass. That's who I am, Megan. That's who I'll always be. A man who kills people and calls it necessary. I know. And you still want to stay? Yes? Why? Megan crossed to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind, pressing her cheek against his back. She could feel his heart hammering, could feel the tension vibrating through every muscle. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm surviving instead of just existing. Because you see the broken parts of me and don't try to fix them. Because you're trying to be better even when the world punishes you for it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because I love you too. And I'm tired of pretending I don't. Franco went very still. Then he turned in her arms, pulling her against his chest with desperate intensity. His face buried in her hair, his hands fisted in her shirt like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. This is a mistake, he said hoarsely. Probably. We're both going to regret it. Maybe. I'm going to fail you, hurt you, become everything you should hate. Then I'll hurt you back and we'll be even. Franco laughed, the sound breaking on something that might have been a sob. You're insane. So are you. That's why this works. They stood there in the blood-soaked study while dawn broke over Chicago and the empire Franco had built teetered on the edge of collapse. Two broken people clinging to each other against the weight of a world that wanted them destroyed. And for the first time in weeks, Megan felt something that wasn't fear or grief or exhaustion. She felt hope. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of damage control and impossible decisions. Dr. Alvarez successfully extracted the bullet from Lucia's shoulder. She was stable, sedated, expected to make a full recovery barring complications. Franco barely left her bedside except when Marco physically dragged him away for meetings that couldn't be postponed. The council was in chaos. 3 more members had been working with Salvatore, minor players who'd believed Franco's mercy made him unfit to lead. Marco rooted them out with ruthless efficiency. They were given a choice, exile with nothing or execution. All 3 chose exile. The organization was bleeding personnel. Guards who'd served Franco for years were disappearing overnight, unwilling to follow a boss who'd chosen a woman over tradition. Franco let them go without reprisals, too exhausted to fight battles on every front. We're down 40% on manpower, Marco reported on the 3rd day. Maybe more. Hard to get accurate numbers when people are ghosting. Franco nodded from his position at Lucia's bedside. Let them go.
Anyone who can't handle the new reality isn't someone I want covering my back. Boss, we're vulnerable. Other families are going to see the exodus and smell blood in the water. Then we prepare for war. With what army? It was a fair question. Franco didn't have an answer.
Megan sat in the corner of the medical suite, watching the empire crumble in real time. She should have felt guilty, should have offered to leave again, but every time she opened her mouth to suggest it, Franco's eyes would find hers and the words would die in her throat. They were in this together now, for better or worse. On the fourth day, Lucia woke up. Franco was at her side immediately, gripping her hand like a lifeline. "Don't move, you were shot. You're safe now." Lucia's eyes focused on his face. "Salvatore?" "Dead." "Good." She tried to sit up and winced. "Roberto?" "In federal custody. I turned him over yesterday." Lucia absorbed this in silence. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Your father would have hated everything you just did." "I know. I'm proud of you." Franco's composure cracked. He pressed his forehead against Lucia's hand, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Megan looked away, giving them privacy in a moment too raw for witnesses. The attack came exactly 1 week after Roberto's surrender. Megan was in her clinic, reorganizing supplies for the third time that day, when the alarm started screaming. Not the estate's alarm system, something worse. Car alarms. Multiple vehicles converging on the property from every direction. She ran to the window and her blood turned to ice. At least 30 vehicles blocked the driveway, disgorging armed men in tactical gear. Not mercenaries this time. Professional soldiers. The kind employed by rival families when they wanted to send a message written in blood. Marco's voice crackled over the intercom system. "All personnel to defensive positions. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Megan grabbed her medical kit and ran for the bunker. Protocol Franco had drilled into her after Roberto's attack. Basement level, reinforced room, security monitoring. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Just run. She made it halfway down the stairs before Franco intercepted her. "Bunker. Now." He was already moving, gun in hand, Marco flanking him with enough firepower to start a small war. "What about you? We're buying you time. Go." "Franco, this isn't a discussion. Move." He kissed her once, hard and desperate, then shoved her toward the basement stairs. Megan ran. Behind her, gunfire erupted, glass shattered, men screamed. The sounds of war echoed through Franco's home, turning his carefully controlled empire into a battleground. She reached the bunker and slammed the steel door shut, engaging locks that would take explosives to breach. The security monitors flickered to life, showing carnage unfolding across every camera angle. Franco's remaining men fought with everything they had, but they were outnumbered 3-1, outgunned, overwhelmed. Megan watched Franco move through the chaos with deadly precision, dropping attackers with surgical accuracy. Marco was at his back, covering blind spots, coordinating defenses through a headset. But it wasn't enough. The attackers kept coming. Wave after wave of professional killers flooding through gates that should have held, breaching defenses that should have been impenetrable. Someone had given them the security codes. Another traitor. Megan's hands curled into fists as she watched Franco's empire collapse in real time. This was her fault. All of it. Her presence had fractured the organization, made Franco vulnerable, turned loyalty into a weapon his enemies wielded against him. She should leave, should disappear. Give Franco a chance to rebuild without the liability she represented. But she couldn't. Because on the monitors, Franco was pinned down behind an overturned table, bleeding from a wound in his side, returning fire with dwindling ammunition. And Marco was on the ground 3 feet away, not moving. Megan's breath caught in her throat. Franco was going to die. Right there, fighting to protect an empire crumbling around him, he was going to die. Unless she did something. Megan's eyes swept the bunker, cataloging resources. Medical supplies. Weapons. Communication equipment. The panic room was designed for one scenario: survive until help arrived. But what if help wasn't coming? What if survival meant fighting instead of hiding? Her hands found the weapons rack. A handgun. 2 full magazines. She'd never fired a gun in her life. Barely knew which end the bullets came out of. But Franco was dying upstairs. And she was done being the victim everyone had to protect. Megan checked the chamber the way she'd seen guards do it, slammed a magazine home, flipped off what she hoped was the safety. Then she unlocked the bunker door and ran back into the war. The gunfire was deafening. Megan burst from the bunker stairwell into chaos that smelled like cordite and blood. Her hands shook around the unfamiliar weight of the gun, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. 3 steps into the hallway and she nearly tripped over a body. One of Franco's guards, face down in a spreading pool of crimson. She forced herself to keep moving. The main corridor was a war zone, bullet holes stitched across marble walls. Shattered glass crunched under her feet. Smoke hung thick in the air, burning her lungs with each gasping breath. A figure rounded the corner ahead, tactical gear, rifle raised. Not Franco's. The man's eyes locked on her. His weapon swung toward her chest. Megan's hands moved before her brain caught up. She raised the gun, squeezed the trigger the way she'd seen in movies, and the recoil nearly broke her wrist. The shot went wide, punching a hole in the ceiling. Plaster rained down. The man laughed, actually laughed, started walking toward her with his rifle steady. Megan fired again. And again. Wild, panicked shots that hit everything except her target. The magazine clicked empty. The man was 10 feet away now. 5. Close enough that she could see the cold amusement in his eyes. He raised his rifle, finger tightening on the trigger. A gunshot cracked from behind Megan. The man's head snapped back. He crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Megan spun. Franco stood 20 feet down the corridor, gun smoking, blood soaking through his shirt from the wound in his side. His face was a mask of fury and terror. "What the fuck are you doing?" he roared. "Saving your life? By getting yourself killed?" He closed the distance between them in 3 strides, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "I told you to stay in the bunker. And I told you I'm done hiding." She yanked her arm free. "Marco's down. You're bleeding. How many men do you have left? 5? 3? That's not..." Another burst of gunfire cut him off. Franco shoved Megan against the wall, his body covering hers as bullets tore through the space they'd just occupied. He returned fire blind, emptying his magazine in the direction of the attack. Silence fell. Temporary. Fragile. Franco's breathing was ragged against her ear. "You can't be here. If they get you, they won't. You don't know that." "Neither do you." Megan pushed him back just enough to meet his eyes. Blood was seeping between his fingers where he pressed against his side. "How bad is it?" "Flesh wound. I've had worse." "Let me see." "No time. We need to..." His knees buckled. Megan caught him before he hit the floor, staggering under his weight. "Fuck," Franco gasped. "Okay, maybe worse than a flesh wound." Megan guided him to the floor with her back against the wall, fingers already working to lift his blood-soaked shirt. The wound was high on his left side, just below the ribs. Entry wound, but no exit. The bullet was still inside him. "You're going into shock," she said, her nurse training overriding the panic clawing at her chest. "We need to get you to the medical suite." "Can't. They'll be watching it, waiting for me to do exactly that." "Then what?" Franco's hand closed around hers. "There's a safe room on the 3rd floor, north wing. Code is your birthday, month, day, year. Medical supplies inside. Get me there and I can walk you through field dressing. You need surgery. I need to survive the next hour, one problem at a time." Footsteps echoed from the floor above. Multiple sets, moving with tactical precision. Franco's jaw clenched. "Can you shoot?" "I just emptied a magazine without hitting anything." "That's a no." He pressed his gun into her hands. "Fresh mag. Safety's off. Point at center mass and pull the trigger until they stop moving. Don't think. Don't hesitate. Just shoot." "Franco, I can't protect you if I'm unconscious. So you're going to have to protect both of us." His eyes burned into hers. "Can you do that?" Megan's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the gun, but she nodded anyway. "Yes. Good girl." Franco tried to stand, made it halfway before his legs gave out again. "Fuck, okay, new plan. You're going to have half carry me." Megan wedged her shoulder under his arm, taking as much of his weight as her smaller frame could manage. They moved through the mansion like wounded animals, every step an agony of slow progress. Franco's blood left a trail behind them. Anyone with eyes could follow it straight to their location. They made it to the third-floor stairwell before the attackers found them. 2 men, rifles, professional calm that said they'd done this 100 times before. Down! Franco shoved Megan behind a marble pillar as bullets chewed into the stone. Shrapnel exploded across her face, stinging cuts that bled into her eyes. Franco returned fire from his position on the floor, each shot precise despite the blood loss turning his face gray. One attacker dropped. The second dove for cover. "Go!" Franco shouted at Megan. "Safe room, now!" "I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice." He fired twice more, forcing the remaining attacker to stay pinned. "Code's your birthday. Lock yourself in and don't come out until I get there." "Franco, that's an order." Megan ran. Hated herself for it. Hated the fear that made her legs pump faster up the stairs while Franco bled out behind her. Hated that survival meant abandoning the man she loved to die alone in a hallway. But she ran anyway. The north wing was untouched by the battle. Eerily quiet. Megan's footsteps echoed off polished hardwood as she counted doors. Third on the left. Looked like every other door in the mansion. Her shaking fingers punched the keypad. Month, day, year. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Megan stumbled inside and immediately understood why Franco called it a safe room. Reinforced walls, security monitors, weapons rack. And yes, medical supplies stocked like a field hospital. She was pulling out trauma kits when the door burst open behind her. Franco collapsed through the entrance, leaving smears of blood on the doorframe. His gun clattered from nerveless fingers. He kicked the door shut and engaged the locks with the last of his strength before sliding down the wall to the floor. "Made it," he gasped. "Told you I would." Megan was already moving, tearing open gauze packages with her teeth, her hands finally steady now that training overrode terror. "Where's the other one? The second attacker? Dead. But there's more coming. Always more." She cut away his ruined shirt, exposing the full extent of the damage. The bullet had punched through muscle and lodged somewhere near his kidney. Blood was pouring from the wound in pulses that matched his heartbeat. Not arterial, but close enough. "This is bad," Megan said. "Tell me something I don't know." She packed the wound with gauze, applying pressure that made Franco's back arch off the wall. His breathing went ragged. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Sorry," Megan whispered. "Sorry, I have to do what you have to do. I can take it." She worked with the focused intensity that had earned her top marks in emergency medicine, pressure dressing, compression bandage. IV line for fluids because Franco was going into hypovolemic shock whether he admitted it or not. The security monitors showed attackers flooding through the mansion below, checking rooms, executing wounded guards, hunting. "They're going to find us," Franco said. His voice was weaker now, thready. "When they do, you use the escape tunnel." "What escape tunnel?" Franco's hand gestured weakly toward the back wall. "Behind the bookcase. Leads to a garage 2 blocks away. Keys in the lockbox. Take the black SUV and drive until you hit the Canadian border." "I'm not running to Canada." "You are if I'm dead." "You're not dying." "Megan, you're not." She tied off the IV line with shaking hands. "I didn't come back upstairs to watch you bleed out in a safe room, so you're going to stay conscious and tell me what to do next." Franco's laugh turned into a cough that brought up blood. Not good. Internal bleeding or punctured organ or both. He needed a hospital, needed surgery, needed about 10 things Megan couldn't provide in a locked room while an army hunted them. "Stubborn," he managed. "You're one to talk." The monitors showed attackers reaching the 3rd floor. 5 of them. Moving in formation, checking doors systematically. They had maybe 3 minutes. Franco's hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "Listen to me. When they breach this door, and they will breach it, you go through that tunnel and you run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just survive." "No. That's not a request. I don't care." Megan's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. "You don't get to save me by dying. That's not how this works." "It's the only way this works." "Bullshit. There's always another way." "Name it." Megan's mind raced through options, finding nothing that didn't end with both of them dead. They were trapped, outgunned. Franco was bleeding out. The attackers would breach the door in minutes. Unless. Her eyes landed on the weapons rack.
on the grenades lined up like dark promises. How many attackers are left? She asked. Franco's eyes narrowed. Don't. How many? Megan, whatever you're thinking, how many? He checked the monitors with obvious reluctance. 30, maybe 40. The main force is still outside securing the perimeter. And in the mansion? 15, 20 at most.
Megan did the math. The safe room was designed to withstand assault, but the hallway outside was a kill zone. Long corridor, no cover, single entrance. If she could lure them in, bottleneck them, use the grenades to... No, Franco said flatly. Absolutely fucking not. You have a better idea? Yes. You escape through the tunnel while I hold them off.
You can barely stand. How are you going to hold off anything? Megan grabbed 2 grenades from the rack, testing their weight. This is the only play that keeps us both alive. It's suicide. It's a chance, which is more than we have sitting here waiting to die. Franco tried to sit up, failed, slumped back against the wall. I can't lose you.
Then help me not get killed. Megan crouched beside him, memorizing the lines of his face in case this was the last time she saw him conscious. Tell me how these work. Tell me how to not blow myself up. Megan, tell me. He stared at her for a long moment. Then with obvious reluctance, he began explaining. Pin, spoon, 3-second fuse, throw like a baseball, don't be stupid. The last part was an official grenade protocol, but Megan appreciated the sentiment. On the monitors, the attackers were 2 doors away now, 90 seconds, maybe less. Megan kissed Franco once, hard and desperate and tasting like blood and goodbye. I love you, she said. Don't. His hand caught the back of her neck, holding her close. Don't say it like that, like you're not coming back. I'm coming back. Promise me. I promise. It was a lie. They both knew it, but sometimes lies were kinder than truth. Megan grabbed the grenades and moved to the door. Her hands were steady now. Training and terror balanced into something that felt almost like calm. Franco's voice stopped her. Megan, when you throw them, don't think, don't aim. Just lob them into the hallway and get back inside. The safe room door will protect you from the blast. Okay? And if something goes wrong, if they get past you, you use the tunnel. No hesitation, no heroics. You run and you survive, for me. Megan nodded, not trusting her voice. She positioned herself beside the door, 1 grenade in each hand, and watched the monitors. The attackers were outside now. One of them was placing a breach charge on the lock. 10 seconds. 5. The explosion blew the door inward. Smoke and debris filled the corridor. Megan pulled the first pin, counted 1, 2, through. The grenade sailed through the smoke and detonated with a concussive force that rattled her teeth. Screams erupted. Men shouted in languages she didn't recognize. She pulled the second pin. Through again. Another explosion. More screams. The smoke was too thick to see through, but she could hear bodies hitting the floor, could hear the wet sounds of shrapnel finding flesh. Megan slammed the safe room door shut and engaged the locks. Silence fell. Heavy. Absolute. Then Franco's voice from the floor behind her. Did you get them? Megan checked the monitors with shaking hands. The hallway was a charnel house. Bodies. Blood. Smoke clearing to reveal devastation. But movement at the far end. 3 attackers. Maybe 4. Wounded but still mobile. Retreating toward the stairwell. Most of them, she said. Good enough. Franco's eyes were starting to glaze. Shock settling in despite the IV fluids. Now comes the hard part. What's that? Waiting to see if their friends avenge them or cut their losses. Megan settled on the floor beside him, back against the wall, gun in her lap. How long? Could be minutes, could be hours. His head lolled against her shoulder. Stay awake. If I pass out and they breach again, you need to be ready. I'm ready. You're terrified. That too. Franco's hand found hers in the darkness between them. His grip was weak but present. You did good. Buying us time. Most people would have frozen. Most people haven't been through what I've been through. Fair point. His breathing was getting shallower, more labored. Megan, if I don't make it, you're making it. But if I don't, I need you to know that you saved me. Not from the attackers. From myself. from becoming the monster my father wanted. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You made me want to be better. That's worth dying for. You're not dying. We're all dying. I'm just doing it faster. Megan pressed her face against his hair, breathing in the scent of him beneath the copper tang of blood. Stay with me, please. I can't do this without you. Yes, you can. You're stronger than you think. I don't want to be strong. I want you alive. Franco's laugh was barely audible. Can't always get what we want. The monitor showed the remaining attackers regrouping outside. A man in expensive tactical gear was talking into a radio, making decisions, probably deciding whether finishing the job was worth losing more men. Megan's grip tightened on the gun. If they came through that door again, she'd empty the magazine into them. Wouldn't think, wouldn't hesitate, would just pull the trigger until nothing moved or her ammunition ran out, whatever it took to keep Franco breathing. The man on the monitor listened to his radio, nodded, made a sharp gesture. The attackers turned and headed for the stairs. Falling back. Megan's breath caught. They're leaving. Smart. Franco's voice was fading. Whoever hired them doesn't pay enough to die in a hallway. They'll regroup, call for reinforcements, try again when we're weaker. Then we need to move. Get you to a hospital. Can't. The second we leave this room, we're exposed. Every family in Chicago knows I'm wounded. They'll be circling like sharks. So we're just trapped here until Marco sends reinforcements. Franco's eyes closed. He knows the protocol. When he regains consciousness, he'll rally whoever's left and come for us. If he regains consciousness. He will. Takes more than a bullet to kill Marco. Megan hoped he was right, because if Marco was dead, if all of Franco's loyal people were dead, they were sitting in an expensive tomb waiting for the next wave of attackers to finish what this one started. She checked Franco's pulse. Thready. Weak. The wound was still seeping blood through the dressings. He needed surgery, transfusions, about 6 different things she couldn't provide. Talk to me, she said. Stay conscious. Tell me something. Anything. Franco's eyes cracked open. Like what? Tell me about the restaurant, the one you wanted to open if you could walk away from all this. Already told you. Nothing fancy. Just good food. Tell me again. Details this time. What would you serve? He was quiet for so long she thought he'd lost consciousness. Then his voice came, barely above a whisper. My grandmother's recipes. Pasta made from scratch every morning. Sauce that cooks for 6 hours until it's perfect. Bread baked fresh for every service. His breathing hitched. Simple things. Done right. No pretension, no bullshit. Just food that makes people feel like they're home. I'd eat there every night. You'd get fat. Worth it. Franco's fingers tightened around hers. When this is over, if we survive, I'm going to do it. Open that restaurant, walk away from the empire, and become someone who makes pasta instead of corpses. Promise? Promise. It was the second lie between them in 10 minutes. But Megan let herself believe it anyway. Let herself imagine a future where Franco wore an apron instead of a gun, where their biggest concern was perfecting marinara instead of surviving assassination attempts, a future that felt impossibly distant but desperately needed. The monitors showed the estate grounds emptying, vehicles pulling away in organized retreat. Within minutes, the property was quiet except for the bodies and the damage. Megan's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her swipe to accept. Hello? Miss Turner. The voice was male, cultured, completely unfamiliar. My name is Vincent Calabrese. I believe we have mutual interest to discuss. Megan's blood turned to ice. Calabrese, head of Chicago's second-largest crime family, Franco's primary rival for control of the city. I have nothing to discuss with you, she said. Oh, I think you do. You see, I'm the one who hired those men currently retreating from Ravellini's estate, and I'm the one who can either send them back to finish the job or call them off permanently. A pause. Which outcome would you prefer? What do you want? Franco Ravellini, dead or in my custody. In exchange, you walk away. Clean identity, money, freedom. Everything you'd need to start over somewhere far from Chicago. Go to hell. Such loyalty. Admirable but stupid. Calabrese's voice hardened. You have 2 hours to deliver him to the address. I'm texting you. If you don't, I send my full force back to that mansion and nobody walks out alive. Not you, not Franco, not the housekeeper recovering in the medical suite. The line went dead. Megan stared at the phone, rage and terror warring in her chest. Beside her, Franco had heard every word. His eyes were open now, fever-bright and furious. "Don't," he said. "Whatever you're thinking, don't. He wants you in exchange for our lives. And you're not stupid enough to believe he'd honor that deal." "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do. You use the tunnel. Get to safety. Let me handle Calabrese." Megan laughed, harsh and broken. "You can barely breathe. How are you handling anything?" "I've survived worse." "Name one time." Franco opened his mouth, closed it. "Okay, fair point. But the answer's still no. You're not trading yourself to Calabrese." "I'm not. I'm trading you. Absolutely fucking not. It's the only way to keep everyone alive. It's suicide. Calabrese will kill you the second he has me. Maybe. Or maybe I can negotiate something better." Megan's mind was already racing through options, finding narrow paths through impossible terrain. "I'm a nurse. I have skills he could use. A hostage he could leverage. I'm worth more alive than dead." "You're worth more than any of this." Franco tried to sit up, failed, gasped in pain. "Megan, please, don't do this. Give me a better option. The tunnel leads to a future where you die, and I spend the rest of my life knowing I could have saved you and didn't." She cupped his face in her hands. "I can't do that, Franco. I can't survive losing you." "You can. You will. I don't want to." Franco stared at her with eyes that held too much understanding, too much acceptance of the impossible choice she was making. "If you do this," he said quietly, "if you walk into Calabrese's hands to save me, I will burn Chicago to the ground getting you back. I will destroy every family, every alliance, every rule that's kept this city from tearing itself apart. Do you understand? I will become the monster my father trained me to be, and I will paint this city red until you're safe." "I'm counting on it." She kissed him one last time. Memorized the taste of his mouth, the scratch of stubble against her palm, the way his hand trembled when it tangled in her hair. Then she stood and walked toward the door before courage failed her. "Megan." She turned back. Franco was braced against the wall, gun in his shaking hand, looking like death barely postponed. 2 hours, he said. "Give me 2 hours before you surrender. That's all I need." "For what?" "To call in every favor I'm owed, every alliance I've built, every person who ever swore loyalty to this family." His eyes burned with fever and fury. "Calabrese wants a war. He's going to get one." Megan nodded once. 2 hours. She checked the tunnel entrance behind the bookcase. Dark, narrow, leading to freedom or another kind of trap. Behind her, Franco was already on his phone, voice rough but commanding, calling in debts and demanding blood. Megan descended into the tunnel and prayed they'd both survive what came next. The tunnel smelled like rust and old concrete and the kind of darkness that pressed against Megan's chest until breathing felt like drowning. Emergency lighting strips cast everything in sickly yellow, turning her shadow into something twisted and unfamiliar on the curved walls. Her phone buzzed, text from the unknown number, an address on the south side. Industrial district, exactly the kind of place where bodies disappeared and nobody asked questions. Megan kept walking. The tunnel ended at a steel ladder bolted into concrete. She climbed with shaking hands, emerging into a garage that smelled like motor oil and abandonment. The black SUV Franco mentioned sat in the corner, keys exactly where he'd promised. She checked her phone. 90 minutes left on Franco's 2-hour deadline. Megan got in the SUV and started driving. Not toward the address Calabrese sent. Not yet. First, she needed to see something. Confirm the suspicion that had been gnawing at her since the attack started. Because 30 armed men storming Franco's estate with perfect knowledge of security codes and defensive positions didn't happen by accident. Someone inside had given them everything. Someone close enough to know details that should have been locked behind layers of protection. Someone Franco trusted. She drove to Chicago General's parking lot and sat in the dark, staring at the exact spot where Roberto's needle had ended her old life. The hospital loomed above her, windows blazing with fluorescent urgency. Inside, nurses were stitching wounds and saving lives and going home to normal problems. Megan would never be one of them again. That realization should have hurt more than it did. Should have felt like grief. Instead, it felt like acceptance. Like shedding skin that no longer fit. Her phone rang. Marco. She answered. "You're alive." "Barely." His voice was rough, pained. "Took a bullet to the chest. Vest caught most of it, but I'm pretty fucking bruised." "Where are you?" "Doesn't matter. Where's Franco?" "Safe room. Won't tell me what you're planning, but he's losing his mind thinking you're going to do something stupid." "I am doing something stupid. It's the only play left." "Megan, listen to me. When this is over, when Calabrese makes his move, Franco's going to need people he can trust. You're one of maybe 3 people left in the organization who fits that category. Don't let him burn the city down for me." He's already started. Called in every favor from here to the East Coast. Half the families in the Midwest are mobilizing. "Good. He'll need them." Megan checked the clock. 70 minutes. "I have to go." "Wait. There's something you need to know about the attack." Megan's stomach clenched. "What?" "We found how they got the security codes. There was a breach 6 weeks ago. Someone with administrator access downloaded everything and sent it to an encrypted server." "Who?" Marco was quiet for a long moment. "Dr. Alvarez." The name hit like a physical blow. Megan's hands tightened on the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. "No, that's not possible. He saved Lucia. He's been treating Franco for years. And he's been on Calabrese's payroll even longer. We found the payments. Wire transfers going back 8 years, small amounts. Easy to miss in the organization's finances. Why? Why would he betray Franco?" "Because Calabrese promised him something Franco couldn't. Immunity. A clean exit from this life with enough money to retire somewhere warm." Marco's voice hardened. "He's in custody now, singing like a canary about every operation he's been part of, every secret he sold, every wound he treated while reporting back to our enemies." Megan's vision blurred. Dr. Alvarez had been the first face she saw after the basement, had treated her ankle, had rebuilt her strength, had sat beside her and told her she'd survive, all while selling them out to the man who wanted them dead. "Does Franco know?" she asked. "Yeah, he knows. Took it about as well as you'd expect, which is to say he put 3 bullets in the wall and had to be physically restrained from executing Alvarez in the medical suite." "Where's he now, Alvarez?" "Locked in the basement cells. Franco wants him alive for questioning. Wants to know exactly how much damage he's done." "And Lucia?" "Recovering. Pissed off beyond belief that the man who saved her life is the same one who set her up to die." Marco paused. "Megan, whatever you're planning, don't trust anyone except Franco's inner circle. This organization has been compromised at every level. We don't know who else is working for Calabrese." "I won't." "And Marco? Thank you for keeping Franco alive." "That's my job. Your job is staying alive long enough for him to find you." The line went dead. Megan sat in the parking lot and felt the last pieces of her old innocence crumble. Dr. Alvarez, the kind professional physician who'd treated her wounds and answered her questions with patient professionalism. A traitor. A liar. Someone who'd looked her in the eyes while planning her death. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. She checked the address Calabrese sent, started the SUV, drove toward whatever fate waited in the industrial district. The warehouse looked abandoned, broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, loading docks that hadn't seen legitimate business in decades. Perfect place for an execution disguised as a negotiation. Megan parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest. The gun Franco had given her was tucked into her waistband, hidden under her jacket. 1 magazine, 15 rounds. Not nearly enough if things went sideways, but enough to take Calabrese with her if dying was the only option left. The warehouse door was unlocked. She stepped into darkness that smelled like mildew and decay. Emergency lights flickered overhead, casting everything in strobing shadows. "Miss Turner?" Calabrese's voice echoed from somewhere in the cavernous space. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality." Megan's hand hovered near the gun. "Where are you?" "Straight ahead. Follow the lights." She walked deeper into the warehouse, every instinct screaming at her to run. The emergency lights formed a path through stacked shipping containers and rusted machinery. At the center of the space, a makeshift office had been set up. Desk, chairs, and Vincent Calabrese sitting behind it like he owned the world. He was older than she expected, late 50s with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested expensive schools and old money. Nothing about him screamed criminal. He could have been a banker or a lawyer or someone's distinguished grandfather. That somehow made him more terrifying. "Please, sit." Calabrese gestured to the chair across from him. Megan remained standing. "Where's Franco?" "Safe. For now. My people are watching his estate, but under strict orders not to engage. I'm a man of my word, Miss Turner. You came alone. I'm holding up my end. What do you want?" "Straight to business. I can respect that." Calabrese poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter, slid one across the desk toward her. "I want Franco Ravellini's empire, his territory, his operations, his connections, everything he's built over the past 20 years. Why not just kill him and take it? Because martyrdom is powerful. Dead, Franco becomes a symbol. His remaining loyalists rally around his memory and fight me for decades. But alive and broken?" Calabrese smiled. "That's different. That shows the world that even the great Franco Ravellini couldn't protect the woman he loves. That choosing sentiment over strength destroys empires. You're insane." "I'm practical. There's a difference." He took a sip of whiskey. "Here's my offer. You convince Franco to surrender his organization to me. Complete transfer of power. He lives. You live. You both walk away to start fresh somewhere far from Chicago. And if I refuse, then I kill him, slowly, while you watch. Then I kill everyone he ever cared about. Lucia, Marco, every guard who showed him loyalty. And when there's nobody left, I'll kill you too. But not quickly. You'll beg for death long before I grant it." Megan's hand moved toward the gun. Calabrese noticed, raised one finger in warning. "I wouldn't. You'd be dead before you cleared leather. And my men have orders to storm Franco's estate the moment you pull that trigger. So we're at an impasse." "Not quite, because I think you're smart enough to see reality. Franco's empire is collapsing. His council turned on him. His doctor betrayed him. Half his people fled rather than fight for a boss who chose a woman over tradition. He's finished, Miss Turner. The only question is whether he accepts that gracefully or dies fighting the inevitable. Franco doesn't do anything gracefully." "Then convince him to start. You're the only person who can." Calabrese leaned forward. "I've been in this business 40 years. Built my family from nothing into Chicago's second most powerful organization. And I did it by understanding one fundamental truth. Sentiment is weakness. The moment you care about something more than power, you lose. Franco cares about people. That's not weakness. That's humanity. And look where humanity got him. Bleeding in a safe room while enemies circle like wolves." Calabrese's expression hardened. "You have 24 hours to deliver my answer. Franco surrenders or everyone dies. Those are the only options. There's always another option. Name it." Megan met his eyes. "You die instead." Calabrese laughed. Actually laughed. "Brave words from a woman with one gun and no backup. I have 40 men in this warehouse right now. Snipers on every roof. Surveillance on every approach. You're not walking out of here unless I allow it." "We'll see." The gunfire started before Calabrese finished processing the threat. Not from Megan. From outside. Heavy automatic weapons fire that punched through the warehouse walls and sent Calabrese diving for cover behind his desk. Franco's voice crackled over a loudspeaker somewhere in the darkness. "Calabrese, you made one critical mistake. You assumed Megan came alone." Megan ran. She dove behind a shipping container as bullets tore through the space where she'd been standing. Calabrese's men poured from hidden positions, returning fire at targets they couldn't see. The warehouse became a war zone. Franco's people had surrounded the building, must have followed her from the estate, waited for the perfect moment to strike. Megan's phone buzzed. Text from Franco. "North exit, blue van. Marco's driving. Run." She ran, weaving through shipping containers while bullets pinged off metal around her. Someone grabbed her arm and she spun, gun raised, finger on the trigger. Marco. Blood-soaked and bruised but alive. "This way!" They ran together through chaos that smelled like smoke and cordite. Behind them, Calabrese was screaming orders. Ahead, a cargo door stood open with a blue van idling just outside. They were 10 feet away when the explosion ripped through the warehouse. The blast wave picked Megan up and threw her like a rag doll. She hit concrete hard enough to see stars. Her ears rang. Her vision swam. Somewhere close, Marco was shouting, but she couldn't hear the words. Strong hands hauled her to her feet, dragged her toward the van. She collapsed into the back seat, and the vehicle was moving before the door closed. Franco was in the driver's seat, pale, sweating, blood seeping through improvised bandages, but alive, moving, driving them away from the inferno consuming the warehouse. "You're supposed to be dying in a safe room," Megan gasped. "I got better." Franco's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "You really thought I'd let you face Calabrese alone? You really thought I'd let you die alone?" "Fair point," Marco groaned from the passenger seat. "You two are perfect for each other, both fucking insane." Behind them, the warehouse collapsed in on itself. Flames reached toward the sky. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance. Megan's ears were still ringing from the explosion. Her body hurt everywhere. But Franco was alive. She was alive. They'd survived. "What was the explosion?" she asked. "Thermite charges on the support beams, set on a timer. Calabrese wanted a private meeting?" Franco's smile was sharp and dangerous. He got one. Just not the kind he expected. "Is he dead?" "Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, his organization is crippled. Building collapsed on 40 of his best people. And the ones who survived will be too busy answering federal questions to come after us." "Federal questions?" Marco held up his phone. "Anonymous tip to the FBI about illegal weapons cache in that warehouse. They'll find enough evidence to put Calabrese away for life, assuming he survived." The pieces clicked together. Franco hadn't just planned a rescue. He'd planned complete destruction, taking out Calabrese's people while simultaneously sicking federal law enforcement on whatever remained. It was brutal, efficient, exactly the kind of ruthless strategy that had built his empire in the first place. "You were never going to surrender," Megan said quietly. Franco's eyes found hers again. "Not a chance." They drove in silence through Chicago's pre-dawn streets, past the places Megan used to know, past her old apartment building, past Chicago General where this nightmare started, past all the pieces of a life she'd never get back. Franco pulled the van into an underground garage in a part of the city Megan didn't recognize. The building above was nondescript, corporate, utterly forgettable. "Safe house," Franco explained. "One of many. Nobody knows about it except Marco and me. We can stay here while things settle." "How long will that take?" "Depends on whether Calabrese survived. If he's dead, his organization fractures. Territory war for 6 months while everyone fights over the scraps. If he's alive and in federal custody, slightly less chaotic, but still messy." Franco killed the engine. "Either way, we've got time to figure out what comes next." Marco helped Franco from the driver's seat. The movement made Franco's face go gray. Blood was soaking through his bandages again. "You need a hospital," Megan said. "Can't risk it. Every hospital in Chicago will be watching for gunshot wounds tonight." "Then I need supplies. Real supplies. Not the field dressing garbage we used earlier." "Already here. Safe house is fully stocked, including a surgical suite." Of course it was. Because Franco Ravellini planned for every contingency except the one where he actually died. They took an elevator to the 3rd floor. The safe house looked like a luxury apartment. Expensive furniture, modern kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows showing Chicago's skyline. But underneath the polish, everything was reinforced. Bulletproof glass, steel doors, enough weapons to outfit a small army. Marco helped Franco to the medical suite while Megan washed blood and warehouse grime from her hands. When she entered the surgical room, Franco was already on the table, shirt cut away, his makeshift bandages removed. The wound looked worse in proper lighting, angry red, still bleeding, infection already setting in around the edges. "This is bad," Megan said. "So you keep telling me." "I'm serious, Franco. The bullet's still inside, probably near your kidney. If it shifted, if there's internal bleeding I can't see, you could die on this table." "Then don't let me die. I'm a nurse, not a surgeon. You're all I've got, so you're going to have to be both." Marco appeared with supplies, surgical tools, antibiotics, local anesthetic because General was too dangerous given Franco's blood loss. Everything Megan needed and several things she'd never used. "I'll walk you through it," Marco said quietly. "Did field surgery in Afghanistan. Not pretty, but it works." Megan's hands shook as she pulled on surgical gloves. "If I fuck this up, you won't." Franco's hand caught hers. I trust you. Those 3 words carried more weight than any declaration of love. Franco Ravellini, who trusted no one, who'd survived 20 years in a world built on betrayal, was putting his life in her hands. Megan took a breath. Then another. Let training override terror. Okay, let's do this. The surgery took 3 hours. Marco talked her through every step while Franco gritted his teeth and tried not to scream. Local anesthetic only did so much when you were digging for a bullet lodged against someone's kidney. Megan's hand stayed steady, cut, clamped, explored, found the bullet wedged between muscle and organ, miraculously intact. Extracted it with forceps that shook despite her best efforts. Got it, she breathed. Franco's laugh was more like a sob. Told you. She irrigated the wound, checked for additional damage, stitched him back together with the kind of careful precision that would have made her surgical instructors proud. When it was done, Franco looked like death warmed over. But his vitals were stable. The bleeding had stopped. He'd live. Probably. Megan collapsed into a chair while Marco hooked Franco up to IV antibiotics and fluids. Exhaustion hit her like a tidal wave. She'd been running on adrenaline for so long she'd forgotten what rest felt like. Sleep, Marco ordered. I'll watch him. You've earned it. Megan wanted to argue, wanted to stay awake and monitor Franco's condition every minute, but her body had other ideas. She made it to the couch in the next room before darkness took her. But she woke to sunlight streaming through bulletproof windows and the smell of coffee. Franco was sitting at the kitchen counter, moving gingerly but upright, alive, drinking espresso like he hadn't been dying 12 hours ago. You're supposed to be in bed, Megan said. I got bored. He poured her coffee. Besides, I heal fast. Always have. Healing fast doesn't mean you should be walking around the day after surgery. Noted. I'll go back to bed after breakfast. He was lying. They both knew it. But Megan let it slide because arguing with Franco Ravellini about self-care was a losing battle. She accepted the coffee and sat across from him. They drank in companionable silence while Chicago woke up beyond the windows. Calabrese survived, Franco said finally. Marco confirmed it an hour ago. Critical condition, but alive. FBI has him in custody. Between his injuries and the evidence they found, he'll be in federal prison for the rest of his life. Good. His organization is fragmenting. 3 lieutenants already fighting over territory. It's going to get bloody before it stabilizes. Are we safe? For now. Nobody knows about this location, and with Calabrese locked up, the immediate threat is gone. Franco set down his cup. But safe is relative. We've made enemies. Lots of them. They'll come eventually. So what do we do? That depends on you. Megan looked up sharply. What do you mean? Franco met her eyes. I meant what I said. About the restaurant. About walking away. Roberto's in federal prison. Calabrese is done. The doctor who betrayed us is locked in my basement waiting for judgment. Every immediate threat has been neutralized. But walking away means abandoning people who've bled for me. Means letting the organization fracture. Means territory wars that'll kill civilians caught in the crossfire. He ran a hand through his hair. Or I stay. Rebuild. Try to make this empire into something less brutal than what my father left. And if I stay, you need to decide if you can live with that. It was the question Megan had been avoiding since the night Franco pulled her from Roberto's basement. Could she live in this world? Could she love a man who killed people and called it necessary? Could she become someone who accepted violence as the price of survival? 3 months ago, the answer would have been no. Simple. Absolute. She was a nurse who saved lives, not someone who enabled the taking of them. But 3 months ago, she hadn't been kidnapped and tortured, hadn't been saved by a mafia boss who saw her as human instead of property, hadn't fallen in love with someone who made her feel alive instead of just surviving. 3 months ago, she was someone else. I'm staying, she said. Franco's expression shifted. Megan, I'm staying, she repeated. Not because I don't have choices, not because I'm traumatized into dependency. I'm staying because I choose this. Choose you. Choose building something better even if it's built on a foundation of ugliness. This life will destroy you. Maybe, or maybe I'll destroy it first. Make it into something worth surviving. She leaned forward. You said you wanted to open a restaurant. Be someone who makes pasta instead of corpses. Why can't you do both? Because empires and restaurants don't mix. Then change the empire. You said yourself you want to make it less brutal, so do it. Use the power you have to actually help people instead of just controlling them. Franco stared at her. You make it sound simple. It's not. It'll be hard and messy and probably fail a dozen times before it works. But isn't that better than just accepting that violence is the only option? You're asking me to become something I've never been. I'm asking you to become who you already are, underneath all the armor. The man who saved me, who chose mercy over revenge, who's trying so hard to be better than his father that it's eating him alive. Franco was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, with something that might have been hope. If we do this, if we really try to change things, there will be consequences. People who think I've gone soft, rivals who smell weakness, enemies on every side. Then we deal with them together. Together. He tested the word. I'm not used to that. Get used to it. Something shifted in Franco's expression. The walls he maintained so carefully crumbled just enough to show the exhausted, hopeful man beneath. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, we try. Build something better. Make this empire into something I won't hate myself for leading. In the restaurant, we'll figure it out. Maybe transition slowly. Legal businesses replacing illegal ones. Legitimate power instead of criminal control. He smiled faintly. It'll take years. Decades, probably. I've got time. Franco stood, crossing to where Megan sat. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. I love you, he said. In case the 100 near-death experiences didn't make that clear. I love you too, in case the stupid heroics and field surgery weren't obvious enough. He kissed her, slow and deep and tasting like coffee, and promises neither of them was sure they could keep. When they broke apart, Marco appeared in the doorway looking uncomfortable. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation. Franco's expression hardened immediately. What kind of situation? The good kind. For once. Marco held up his phone. Roberto's lawyer just called. He wants to make a deal. Full cooperation with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentencing. What kind of cooperation? Everything. Every crime family he had contact with, every corrupt official on his payroll, every operation he knew about from listening to you for 20 years. Marco's smile was sharp. He's going to burn down half of Chicago's criminal infrastructure to save his own ass. Franco absorbed this in silence. Then he started laughing, a real laugh that shook his shoulders and made him wince from the surgery. Roberto was always selfish, he said. Figures he'd do the right thing for completely the wrong reasons. Is this good for us? Megan asked. It's complicated. Roberto's testimony will destroy a lot of old alliances, make enemies of people who used to be neutral, but it also positions me as the reasonable one. The boss who's willing to work with federal authorities when necessary. That's valuable. So we use it. We use it. Franco's hand found hers. Carefully. But yes. 6 months later, Megan stood in the ruins of what used to be Franco's estate and tried to see the future in the rubble. The attack had destroyed most of the mansion. Insurance would cover repairs, but Franco had made a different choice. Sell the property. Let someone else build on ground soaked with too much blood. Instead, he'd bought a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. Smaller, less ostentatious. The kind of place where normal families lived normal lives. Or as normal as life got when one half of the couple ran Chicago's most powerful criminal organization. Franco appeared beside her, walking without the limp that had plagued him for months after the surgery. Second thoughts? No. Just trying to remember what this place looked like before everything went to hell. Expensive, pretentious, a monument to my father's ego. Franco wrapped an arm around her waist. Good riddance. Megan leaned into him, breathing in the scent beneath his cologne. How's Lucia? Moved into the brownstone yesterday. Claimed the entire third floor for herself and her extensive collection of kitchen equipment. He smiled. I think she's planning to run my life from there. She's been running your life since you were 8. This just makes it official. They stood in comfortable silence, watching demolition crews carefully dismantle what remained of the estate. In the distance, Chicago's skyline glittered in afternoon sun. Megan's clinic had reopened 2 weeks ago. Not at the estate. In a storefront in a neighborhood that desperately needed medical care. She treated gunshot wounds and stab wounds and overdoses. But she also treated kids with asthma and elderly patients with diabetes and pregnant women who couldn't afford prenatal care. Franco funded it completely, called it community investment, refused to use it for money laundering or any other criminal purpose. Just let it be good, he'd said. One thing in this empire that's actually good. Roberto's testimony had caused exactly the chaos Franco predicted. 3 rival families fractured, 24 corrupt officials indicted. The entire landscape of Chicago's underworld reshuffled. Franco had navigated it with brutal precision, making alliances, eliminating threats. Slowly, carefully, building an organization that relied less on violence and more on economic power. It was working. Mostly. There were still bodies, still violence, still nights when Franco came home with blood on his clothes and shadows in his eyes. But there were also nights when he came home and cooked dinner, when they sat on the brownstone's back patio and talked about nothing important. When he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth protecting. Those nights made the others bearable. Marco called, Franco said. The last of Calabrese's people surrendered. Territory is officially ours. How do you feel about that?
Exhausted, relieved, terrified I'm going to fuck it up. He looked at her, but also hopeful, which is new. Hope's good. Hope's dangerous, makes you soft. You're already soft, you just hide it well. Franco laughed. Don't let that get around. I have a reputation to maintain. They walked back to Franco's car, a sedan now instead of the armored SUVs he used to favor. Bulletproof glass, reinforced frame, but otherwise normal looking. Part of the new image he was carefully constructing.
Less mafia boss, more legitimate businessman with questionable associates. The drive to the brownstone took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that were slowly healing from decades of neglect. Franco's money was part of that healing. Community centers, after-school programs, small business grants that didn't come with strings attached. Buying goodwill, he called it. But Megan saw the way he watched kids playing in parks his funding had rebuilt. The way he relaxed when elderly residents waved at him on the street. He was becoming someone new, someone better. It was slow, painful, imperfect, but it was happening. At the brownstone, Lucia had dinner waiting, homemade pasta, fresh bread, the kind of simple, perfect food that made Megan understand why Franco dreamed of restaurants. They ate together, Franco, Megan, Lucia, and Marco, who'd moved into the brownstone's second floor and appointed himself permanent head of security. It felt almost like family, almost normal. After dinner, Franco and Megan retreated to their bedroom on the 4th floor. The space was smaller than the estate suite, but warmer, more lived in, books stacked on nightstands, photos on the dresser showing moments Megan was still learning to treasure. Franco's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, set it aside. Problem? Megan asked. Nothing that can't wait until morning. Tonight I'm off duty. You're never off duty. Then tonight I'm pretending. He pulled her against him, hands settling on her waist. Dance with me. There's no music. So we'll make our own. They swayed together in the quiet bedroom, finding rhythm in shared breathing and heartbeats that finally beat at the same pace. This was what Megan had been fighting for. Not safety, not normalcy, just moments of peace stolen from a world that wanted them destroyed. I'm going to marry you, Franco said quietly. Someday. When things are stable enough that I can promise you a future instead of just survival. I don't need promises. I know, but I need to make them anyway. Megan tilted her head up to look at him. Franco's eyes held the kind of exhausted hope she'd become intimately familiar with, the look of someone who'd survived hell and was desperately trying to believe in heaven. Okay, she said, someday, when you're ready. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll figure it out together. They held each other in the darkness while Chicago hummed outside the windows. Two broken people who'd somehow found wholeness in the wreckage. It wasn't the ending either of them had imagined. Wasn't clean or perfect or tied up with neat resolution. But it was real and honest and more than either of them thought they deserved. Franco's phone buzzed again. This time he answered.
Yeah, okay. No, handle it yourself. I'm done for the night. He listened. Marco, I don't care if the building's on fire. Unless someone's actively dying, it waits until morning. A pause. Good. Thank you. He hung up, tossed the phone onto the dresser, turned back to Megan with something that might have been a smile. Where were we? You were promising me a future.
Right. That.
Franco's hand cupped her face.
How about this? Tomorrow we start planning the restaurant. Real planning. Location, menu, timeline. Turn the dream into something concrete. While still running a criminal empire? While transitioning a criminal empire into something that doesn't require violence to function. It'll take time. But we've got time. Megan pulled him down for a kiss that tasted like hope and home and the kind of future worth fighting for. When they broke apart, Franco rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not giving up on me. For believing I could be better. For loving me despite every reason not to. You're worth it. I'm really not. That's not your decision to make. Franco laughed softly. Stubborn. You're one to talk. They fell into bed together, exhausted and healing and alive. Outside, Chicago stretched into darkness. Inside, two people who'd survived impossible odds held each other and dreamed of mornings that didn't start with gunfire. It wasn't perfect. Wasn't safe. Wasn't anything close to the life Megan Turner had imagined when she was just a nurse trying to save lives in an emergency room. But it was hers. Theirs. Built from wreckage and blood and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. And for the first time since Roberto's needle pierced her neck in a rain-soaked parking lot, Megan fell asleep without nightmares. Because the monster who'd haunted her was locked in federal prison, the empire that enabled him was being slowly dismantled, and the man who'd saved her was lying beside her, breathing steadily, finally allowing himself to rest. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new threats, new impossible choices between survival and morality. But tonight, they had peace and love, and the fragile, precious certainty that they'd face whatever came next together. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.